Welcome back, brothers, to Warhammer. Tonight we're diving into lore of the cannibalistic Ultramarine chapter. Before we get to the madness, be sure to like and comment any videos and topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe from the Emperor. And I thank you guys for support. Y'all been killing it. Now, let's get to the madness.
The Basilica Mortis turned in silence above the corpse of Possul. Once, the world below had known no dawn. Its forests had clawed upward beneath a lightless sky, their black leaves drinking heat from volcanic fissures. Cannibal tribes had hunted one another across plains of ash, believing courage dwelt in the blood and memory endured within the bones. From those tribes, the Mortifactors had taken their sons. From those sons, they had raised killers worthy of the Emperor. Now, Possul was a dead sphere. Hive Fleet Leviathan had stripped its oceans, devoured its forests, and sucked the marrow from its mountains. Nothing remained but cracked stone, metallic dust, and the pale scars left by capillary towers. The planet revolved beneath the fortress monastery, like a skull emptied for ritual use. Within the Basilica Mortis, the dead watched over the living. Thousands of skulls occupied the walls of the Hall of Victors. Some were human. Others bore horns, fangs, secondary jaws, or elongated craniums scored by bolter impacts. Every trophy had been cleaned, engraved, and chained into its appointed niche. Names and battles covered the bone in high Gothic script. Wax from black devotional candles ran through the carvings like congealed blood. 300 battle brothers knelt beneath them. They wore no helmets. Their faces were motionless, their eyes shut, their breathing slowed until the vast hall seemed filled with statues rather than warriors. Blackened bone plate caught the candlelight in hard, funereal edges. Chains of teeth and finger bones hung from gorgets. Scrimshawed skulls rested upon shoulder guards. Every suit of armor carried a piece of the dead. At the center of the hall stood a sarcophagus carved from a single block of Possulan basalt. Captain Malak Voros lay within it. The stone pressed against the bulk of his armorless body. He had crossed his arms over his chest, placing one hand above each heart. Apothecary Farkas stood beside the open tomb, watching the life signs scrolling across a brass-framed diagnosticator. Voros's primary heart beat once. The secondary followed 4 breaths later. Farkas adjusted the regulator needle buried in the captain's neck. A measured infusion entered Voros's bloodstream, slowing the pulse further. The captain's skin cooled. His lips darkened. Blood withdrew from the surface of his scarred face. A mortal would already have been dead. Voros descended beyond sleep. He passed through darkness without sensation. He heard the deep tolling of bells, though the Basilica's bells had not sounded since Possul's death. Each peal rolled through him like an artillery detonation heard beneath the earth. Then came the smell of wet bone. The darkness opened. A skull floated between the stars. It was human in shape, but larger than a moon. Cracks divided its brow. Cathedral spires rose from its crown like broken teeth, and continents of iron covered its jaw. The empty sockets did not contain darkness. They contained mouths, thousands of them. They chewed without flesh. They opened and closed in blind hunger, rows of translucent teeth grinding against one another. Rivers of men marched towards them across bridges of vertebrae. Infantry regiments advanced in ordered ranks beneath torn banners. Tanks rolled beside them. Priests raised aquila-topped staves. Officers drew swords and shouted commands Voros could not hear. None resisted. The soldiers entered the skull willingly. The mouths consumed them by the million. Bodies vanished between the teeth. Armor buckled. Tanks broke apart. Blood poured from the sockets in streams that became oceans, yet the marching columns never faltered. Something waited behind the skull. Voros could not see its shape. It was too vast to possess shape. It existed as pressure, as hunger, as an intelligence stretched between countless worlds. A billion eyes opened in the void. Some were black, some were milky and lidless, some belonged to creatures not yet born. Every eye fixed upon him. His hearts accelerated. The skull turned. Its lower jaw descended, revealing a throat filled with stars. A voice emerged from within it, spoken in the tones of dead brothers, murdered tribesmen and warriors, whose names had been carved into the Hall of Victors. Feed the grave until the grave is poisoned. Voros opened his eyes. His primary heart struck hard enough to arch his spine against the stone. The secondary heart followed, forcing blood through veins that had almost ceased to carry it. He drew breath with a sound like a blade dragged across iron. Blood ran from both nostrils. It crossed his lips, warm and salted. Farkas withdrew the regulator needle. You crossed the threshold. I returned. That remains to be judged. The apothecary offered no hand. Voros rose from the sarcophagus under his own strength. His muscles trembled once, then obeyed him. Around the hall, hundreds of mortifactors opened their eyes. Reclusiarch Caroly stood before the tomb. His skull helm hung from one fist, its ivory face stained brown around the respirator grill by old blood. In his other hand, he carried final benediction, a power scythe with a blade shaped from black adamantium. What did the dead show you? Caroly asked. Voros wiped the blood from his mouth and looked at the red smear upon his fingers. A world made into bait. Before Caroly could speak, the hall's great doors opened. A chapter serf stumbled through them. He wore the grey robes of the astropathic sanctum. Blood had soaked the cloth from throat to waist. One eye had ruptured, leaving a dark cavity threaded with burned nerves. The surviving eye rolled blindly beneath a milky film. Two servitors supported him by the arms. Their augmetic hands had sunk through his flesh to the bone, but the astropath gave no sign that he felt it. Transmission, he whispered. His mouth worked again. 3 teeth fell onto the floor. Transmission from Vardos, Ultima Segmentum, Industrial Classification, Strategic Tithe World. Voros stepped from the tomb. Speak. The astropath convulsed. His spine bowed until vertebrae cracked beneath the skin. Population exceeds 80 billion. Armed defense strength exceeds 6 billion. Orbital manufactorums operational. Macro shell production at full tithe capacity. Promethium extraction oceans active. Void dock facilities supplying 3 crusade fronts. His voice changed. Other voices entered it, layered beneath his own. Men screamed through his mouth from light years away. 3 agri-worlds consumed. Shrine Moon Damaska consumed. Fleet designation unknown. Ordo Xenos provisional designation Pale Moor. Leviathan lineage confirmed. Shadow advancing. The astropath's fingers dug into the servitors supporting him. Nails tore loose. Time to contact uncertain. Weeks, perhaps less. Astropathic choir failing. Defense command requests immediate reinforcement. Repeats. Immediate reinforcement. Repeats. For the love of the throne, we cannot... His remaining eye burst. Fluid and blood ran down his cheek. He sagged between the servitors, still breathing, though no further words came. Caroly looked at Voros. A summons carried through death. A warning carried through weakness, said Codicier Sered. The librarian approached from the circle of kneeling warriors. His scalp was tattooed with concentric funerary sigils, each marking a campaign in which he had entered the minds of the dying. Psychic hood veins rose behind his head like the bones of an iron crown. Voros looked again at the astropath. Can he transmit? Farkas placed 2 fingers against the ruined man's throat. No. Then harvest what remains useful. The servitors turned away, dragging the astropath towards the apothecarian. His heels left twin lines of blood across the black floor. No warrior watched him go. Voros climbed the steps to the Hall of Victor's central dais. The mortifactors remained kneeling beneath the skulls of their predecessors. His armor waited upon a rack behind the tomb, black ceramite edged in corpse white, its right pauldron marked by a skull above crossed scythes. Pale Moor comes for Vardos, he said. His voice carried without amplification. It has devoured worlds that fed armies. It now seeks the manufactorums that arm them. Should Vardos fall, 3 crusade fronts will starve of shells, fuel, and hulls. Veteran Sergeant Bors rose among the 1st Company warriors. How many of us? The 3rd Company entire, elements of the 1st and 7th, 36 neophytes of the 10th, 14 engines of war, 3 ancients. Murmurs did not follow. Mortifactors did not waste breath upon surprise. 386 warriors, Bors said, against a hive fleet, against its throat. Voros looked across the assembled chapter. We will not hold every wall. We will not defend every manufactorum. We will not squander the Emperor's blood contesting ground that has no value. Billions will fight upon Vardos. Billions will die. Their deaths will reveal where the enemy's will resides. Carolee raised final benediction. And when the throat is revealed? Voros tasted the blood still coating his teeth. We cut until the head comes free. The armory rites began before the bells had finished tolling. Chapter serfs moved through vaulted chambers beneath the Hall of Victors, bearing ammunition, oils, and reliquaries upon bent backs. Some had served the chapter for generations, their limbs replaced by crude augmetics as age consumed them. Others were descendants of refugees taken from Possil before its destruction. Their faces had been branded with the Mortifactors' sigil. Voros stood upon an iron dais while serfs armed him. They locked the black segments of his war plate around his body. Fiber bundles contracted against his limbs. Neural plugs entered the ports along his spine. The armor awakened around him, reading the pulse of both hearts and matching its strength to his movements. A serf secured a chain of finger bones beneath his left pauldron. Another fastened purity seals to his breastplate. The parchment strips bore litanies copied from the final testimonies of dead captains. His helmet came last. Its faceplate was the color of old bone. A vertical black stripe crossed the brow and mouth grill, dividing the skull visage in two. Across the chamber, 36 neophytes stood stripped to the waist. Scout Sergeant Vardas walked before them. His face had been cut so often that scar tissue distorted one side of his mouth into a permanent sneer. He stopped before the youngest of the aspirants. The neophyte was broad, even without power armor. Ritual scars crossed his chest. Until that moment, he had been called Tamas. Vardas seized him by the jaw. "You carry a name you have not earned." The neophyte did not resist. "No, Sergeant. You have taken lives." "Yes, Sergeant. Lives are common. Vermin kill. Disease kills. Cowards kill from behind walls." Vardas drew a hooked knife. "A mortifactor takes proof." He cut the name runes from the leather cord around the neophyte's neck. The blade sliced through cord and skin alike. Blood ran down the young warrior's chest. Vardas threw the runes into a brazier. "You are faceless." The assembled blooded turned their backs. None spoke the neophyte's former name. None acknowledged his presence. A serf placed a combat blade and bolt carbine at the faceless warrior's feet. Vardas leaned close enough that his scarred lips almost touched the neophyte's ear. "Return with a worthy skull," he said, "or return without a head." The faceless lifted the weapons. "I hear and obey." In the vehicle crypts, Tech Marine Vask awakened the dead. Incense smoke rolled between land raiders resting upon mag clamps. Servitors fed belts of mass-reactive ammunition into hurricane bolter magazines. Lascanon capacitors whined beneath the prayers of engine seers. Terminators entered the assault transports one by one, their plate marked with campaign scars and trophy chains. Thunderhawks crouched within launch berths, while arming crews loaded magma bombs beneath their wings. Bunker-breaking warheads slid into internal racks. Fuel lines pulsed. Machine spirits growled through caged engines. At the crypt center stood ancient Odon. His dreadnought chassis had the proportions of a walking tomb. The armored sarcophagus bore the finger bones of Pozulan chieftains, wired into intricate spirals around the viewing slit. An assault cannon occupied one arm. The other ended in a power fist, large enough to close around a mortal man and leave nothing but liquid between its fingers. Vask inserted the awakening key. Runes flared red. The dreadnought shuddered. A voice emerged through the sarcophagus grille, distorted by static and 10 millennia of rage. "Is the night hunting us again?" "The night is dead," Vask answered. "Leviathan comes." The assault cannon began to rotate. "Then open the crypt." Later, when the launch rites were complete, Sered found Voros alone upon an observation bridge overlooking Posel. The dead world filled the armored viewport. The vision was not ancestral, the librarian said. Voros did not turn. "You speak with certainty." "I speak with caution. The shadow in the warp precedes the fleet. It presses upon dream, instinct, and memory. What you saw may have been cast into your mind by the hive mind. Then the hive mind has shown me its fear, or its design." Voros faced him. Sered's eyes were black with psychic dilation. "A weapon does not cease to be useful because the enemy forged it," Voros said. "A blade offered by an enemy is usually aimed at the hand that accepts it. Then I will hold it by the edge." The strike cruiser Headtaker entered the warp beneath a chorus of funerary bells. It emerged above Vardos into catastrophe. The system was already dying. Merchant haulers fled from the planet in uncontrolled swarms. Two collided before the cruiser's prow, one vessel shearing through the other's habitation spine. Atmosphere, bodies, and cargo erupted into the void. Thousands of crew spun away amid glittering fragments of ice. Navy escorts burned beyond them. One destroyer rolled without power, its hull ruptured by an organic projectile that continued to writhe within the wound. Another vessel fired point-blank into a cloud of spore mines, vanishing inside a sphere of green-white flame. Vardos filled the forward oculus, a world wrapped in orbital docks, manufacturing rings, and defense stations. Half those stations were firing upon Imperial ships. "Targeting Auspex confirms corrupted command codes," a bridge serf reported. Blood ran from his ears beneath the pressure of the approaching shadow. "Genestealer infiltration probable. Defense platform Sepulchre 9 has locked weapons upon the refugee fleet." A tactical hololith displayed the station and its personnel estimate. 38,000 souls. "Can its command core be recovered?" Voros asked. "Negative, Lord. Internal Vox traffic indicates widespread insurrection." Voros looked to the weapons throne. "Destroy it." The order passed through the Headtaker. Lances fired. Sepulchre 9 became a white star. Its armor folded inward before the reactor detonated. The station split apart, killing every cultist, every loyalist, and every soul still begging for rescue over the open Vox. The wreckage had not finished burning when the sky above Vardos opened. Mycetic spores entered the atmosphere in numbers beyond counting. They fell as a second night, fleshy capsules wrapped in fire, millions of them descending through the smoke of orbital war. The Headtaker's assault decks opened. Drop pods hung ready within their cradles. Thunderhawks screamed through launch tunnels. Mortifactors stood in ordered silence, their bone-colored helms turned towards the world below. Lord General Hector Vane appeared upon the command hololith. The transmission fractured beneath static and distant explosions. "Captain Voros," he said, "how many civilians can be saved?" Voros watched the burning spores cover the planet. "None," he said. "We are here to save the Imperium." Hive Ossuar burned beneath a sky that had forgotten the stars. Mycetic spores fell through the cloud mantle in incandescent multitudes, each impact staining the horizon with fresh fire. Defense lasers stabbed upward from the Hive's armored crown. Hydra batteries hammered the heavens. Macro cannon emplacements discharged with such violence that the upper spires trembled, yet the darkness above remained thick with descending shapes. The Mortifactors did not reinforce the walls. Their Thunderhawks crossed above kilometers of trench lines, packed shoulder to shoulder with Vardosian infantry. Tanks waited in revetments. Artillery engines elevated their barrels towards coordinates that had already become obsolete. Priests moved among the ranks, pressing aquilae against frightened brows and shouting of martyrdom, while the first organisms shrieked through the atmosphere. Captain Voros watched it all through the gunship's assault bay picked feed. 6 billion soldiers defended Vardos. Their bodies covered the planet's fortifications like a second layer of armor. They were formidable only in aggregate. Individually, each was a pulse, a rifle, and a quantity of blood waiting to be spent. Hive Ossua's astropathic nexus had gone silent. Its deep auger relays no longer reported orbital contacts. Transit shafts beneath the primary void shield generators had been opened without authorization. Internal defense batteries were firing upon loyal formations. The surface armies could bleed without him. The Nexus could not. Kill teams Mortis, Ossuary, and Finalis will strike the lower defense chambers, Voros said over the command channel. 7th Company elements will secure the shield generators. 1st Company remains in reserve until the enemy reveals its strongest concentration. Sergeant Bors answered from the lead land raider, descending in a separate transport. You would deny us first blood. I would deny the enemy knowledge of our blade. A pause followed. Accepted. Voros closed the channel. Around him, 3rd Company warriors stood mag-locked to the deck, bone-colored helms bowed beneath the red assault lumens. Trophy chains shifted against black ceramite as the Thunderhawk banked. Severed cultist heads hung from several warriors' belts, taken during the brief fighting around the landing fields. One still wore the brass spectacles of a Hive functionary. Another possessed a third eye beneath a blister of purple flesh. Reclusiarch Caroli held final benediction across his chest. The dead wait below, he said. They always do, Voros answered. The Thunderhawk struck the command Basilica's landing platform hard enough to crack the ferrocrete. Its assault ramp fell. Heat, incense, and the copper stink of massed injury entered the bay. Voros descended into noise. The command Basilica had once been a place of military grandeur. Marble saints towered between pillars plated in gold leaf. Regimental banners hung from the vaulted roof. Murals showed Vardosian soldiers crushing Xenos beneath their boots, while the Emperor watched from a throne of sunlight. Now the saints were blackened by smoke. Medici orderlies worked beneath them, cutting uniforms from wounded officers and sawing through crushed limbs. Blood ran between the floor tiles. Vox servitors had been chained to iron lecterns around the central strategium. Several screamed continuously as damaged augmetics forced corrupted signals through their nervous systems. Lord General Hector Vane waited before the primary hololith. He was an old man held upright by discipline, rejuvenate treatments, and a steel brace hidden beneath his greatcoat. His hair had gone white. One eye had been replaced by a brass-lensed augmetic. A power sword hung at his hip, polished despite the ash coating everything around him. Colonel Dravus Cord stood beside him in a soot-stained cuirass. The colonel's jaw was broad, his head shaved, his expression that of a man who had expected salvation and discovered an execution detail. The two officers looked past Voros at the warriors entering behind him. Bone-faced giants crossed the basilica without ceremony. Their boots crushed discarded surgical tools beneath them. Heads swung from their belts. One battle brother murmured a funerary count as he passed the wounded, naming each man whose injuries would kill him before the hour ended. No mortifactor offered comfort. No warrior accepted the prayers shouted by the basilica's priests. Voros stopped before the hololith. Vane saluted. Captain, by the throne, your arrival. Display the internal breaches. The Lord General lowered his hand. The hololith changed. Hive Ossuar appeared as a layered mountain of light, its upper spires piercing the clouds and its foundations descending deep into the crust. Scores of red runes pulsed through the lower levels. The shield generators glowed amber. Transit arteries beneath them were marked as compromised. Vane gathered himself. Cult insurgents have seized the Manufactorum depths and corpse processing districts. They have cut the Auger nexus from the command grid. My engineers believe they are attempting to collapse the shield relays. They have already opened the subterranean transit gates, Voros said. Cord looked at him. We cannot confirm that. You cannot confirm anything. Your augurs are blind. The colonel's face tightened. Voros enlarged the lower hive. 40 habitation levels burned red. Seal these strata. Vane glanced at the display. Those levels contain civilian districts. They contain an infection. Nearly 900 million Imperial subjects remain below the blast doors. Then they have 23 minutes. Cord stepped closer to the hololith. The lift banks could not extract 1/10 of them in that time. I know. The word struck, harder than a shout. Vane looked from the captain to the glowing levels. You are condemning loyal citizens. I am containing a Genestealer cult before it reaches your shield controls. There are children below. Voros's helm turned towards him. There are mouths, lungs, and hands below. The enemy will use all three. Your sentiment does not alter their strategic value. Vane's augmetic eye clicked as its lens narrowed. I will not authorize the sealing. You requested the Adeptus Astartes. I requested aid. You received judgment. Voros opened the command channel. Vask, assume control of the lower blast door network. 23 minutes from my mark. At expiry, seal every access between the 40th lower level and the mid-hive. Weld the locks. Flood the service passages with promethium vapor. Techmarine Vask answered in a burst of machine-blessed static. Command received. Vane reached for Voros's arm. Karoli moved before his fingers touched ceramite. The Reclusiarch's scythe blade stopped against the Lord General's throat. Its dormant power field was silent, but the edge rested close enough to draw a thin line of blood. Do not lay a hand upon the chosen dead, Karoli said. Vane froze. Voros watched the countdown begin. Far below, warning klaxons awakened across 40 levels. The Faceless descended before the doors closed. They entered through corpse lifts too narrow for warriors in full battle plate. Scout Sergeant Vardas led 36 neophytes and a company of Vardosian auxiliaries into the underhive, riding down through a shaft slick with grease and human residue. The warrior once called Tamas stood against the cage wall. No helmet protected his head. None of the Faceless were permitted one. They breathed the hive directly, tasting blood, chemical smoke, sewage, and the sweet rot rising from corpse-rendering vats. Industrial toxins burned a mortal trooper's lungs. To an aspirant of the Adeptus Astartes, they were merely another flavor of decay. The lift passed through darkness. Tamas could see the faces around him. Gene-forged eyes gathered what little light leaked from the control runes. Every neophyte wore black carapace beneath a stripped harness, a bolt carbine held close, and a combat blade secured across the chest. The auxiliaries avoided looking at them. One soldier made the sign of the Aquila. His fingers shook. Vardas noticed. Save your prayers until ammunition fails, he said. The Emperor respects loaded weapons. The lift descended beyond the last functioning lumen. For a heartbeat, Tamas imagined Posel. He had never hunted beneath its black forests. He had known the world only through hypno-indoctrination, inherited recollection, and the testimonies of warriors old enough to remember its night. Yet the darkness felt ancestral. It pressed close around him, hiding predators, stripping away the lies made possible by light. The lift stopped. Its doors opened upon a corpse processing gallery. Hooks hung from ceiling rails. Conveyor trenches ran through the floor, carrying unclothed bodies towards rendering vats somewhere beyond sight. Some corpses wore worker brands. Others bore the wounds of recent fighting. All had been decapitated. Vardas raised one fist. The column halted. Tamas heard water dripping, machinery grinding, something breathing within the walls. Vardas pointed towards the drainage ducts. The first autogun volley came from behind them. Rounds tore through the auxiliary ranks. Men folded against one another, backs erupting in wet sprays. A soldier beside Tamas lost the crown of his skull. Grey tissue splashed across the neophyte's face. Mining lasers fired from the gallery roof. One beam struck a faceless through the sternum. Scout armor flashed white. The neophyte fell with a smoking cavity where his hearts had been, ribs glowing at the edges like furnace bars. "Contact rear!" Vardus roared. Tamas turned and fired. His bolt carbine bucked against his shoulder. Mass reactive shells struck pale figures pouring from maintenance hatches. The first hybrid lost an arm. The second shell entered its abdomen and detonated, casting loops of intestine across the conveyor rails. The cultists came in worker smocks, militia fatigues, and stolen flak armor. Some appeared almost human. Others possessed ridged brows, purple skin, and extra limbs clutching blades or stub pistols. They chanted as they attacked. "The day of ascension! The sacred hunger comes!" Vardus shot the speaker through the mouth. The cultist's head burst behind him, spraying teeth and brain matter over those following. A vent grill tore open above the scouts. A long clawed arm seized one faceless by the throat. He fired upward, but the creature dragged him into the duct before his shots found flesh. His boots struck the metal walls. Tamas heard armor splitting, then the wet snap of bones breaking one after another. The locator rune representing the neophyte flickered upon Tamas's wrist display. Then it vanished. "Hold formation," Vardus said. The auxiliaries broke first. 3 fled towards the lift. A cultist heavy weapon opened fire from the gallery's far end. Solid rounds ripped through their backs, emptied their torsos, and hammered the lift doors with fragments of bone. Tamas moved towards the weapon. He fired while advancing, choosing each target through smoke and swinging chains. One hybrid spun as a bolt took it beneath the shoulder. Another leapt from a conveyor bridge and landed upon him, 4 arms clawing for his face. Tamas caught its upper wrists. The thing hissed inches from him. Its human mouth split around needle teeth. A second jaw pushed through ropes of saliva. He drove his forehead into its nose. Bone collapsed. The hybrid loosened its grip. Tamas tore one arm from its socket and rammed his combat blade beneath the jaw. The point entered the skull and scraped against the inner crown. He kicked the corpse from the blade. A deeper report rolled through the gallery. Not the crack of autoguns. Bolters. The blooded had arrived. 3rd Company advanced through the corpse lifts in full war plate. Their bolters spoke in measured sequence, each discharge followed by the detonation of flesh. Cultists ceased to resemble bodies. Torsos opened. Limbs spun away. The gallery walls became lacquered with blood and fragments of internal organs. A power fist closed around a hybrid's waist. The Mortifactor wearing it squeezed. Spine and pelvis collapsed together. Meat burst between the weapon's fingers and splattered across his breastplate. He cast the remains into the rendering trench without looking down. Chainswords screamed. Teeth bit through bodies faster than flesh could fall away. One cultist was split from collar to groin, his chest peeled open around the blade. Another lost both legs and continued clawing forward until a boot crushed his skull into the floor grill. Carolee walked among them. Rounds struck his armor and flattened against black ceramite. He wielded final benediction in precise, 2-handed sweeps. The scythe's power field flared as it crossed necks. Heads lifted from shoulders in groups, trailing spinal cords and arterial spray. Carolee did not rage. He harvested. "Blood remembers," he intoned. The blooded answered as they killed. "Bone endures." The cult's resistance broke. Vardus sent the faceless ahead. They followed retreating hybrids through galleries where human cadavers hung in curtains. The path descended towards the defense nexus. Along the way, they found Vardosian soldiers nailed to walls, their mouths packed with wax devotional seals. Some still lived. The Mortifactors passed them. A command chamber waited beneath the astropathic vaults. Its doors had been barricaded from within. Melter charges opened them. The blast turned the first defenders into black silhouettes burned across the walls. Inside, a man in a Vardosian general's uniform attempted to shoot himself. Karoli caught his wrist before the pistol fired. The traitor's face was human, but a bruise-colored ridge moved beneath the skin of his brow. He wore medals from 3 crusades. Gold braid decorated his shoulders. His breastplate bore the Aquila. Karoli broke his arm. The general screamed and fell to his knees. Apothecary Farkas approached, his narthecium clicking open. "Keep him alive," Karoli said. Farkas drove a stimulant spike through the general's breastplate and into his heart. The prisoner convulsed. Voros entered moments later. He studied the general without anger. "How long?" The traitor spat blood across the captain's greave. Karoli removed 2 fingers. The general screamed until Farkas injected another compound that forced his throat open and kept him conscious. Voros repeated the question. "How long has the defense grid been compromised?" "Years," the prisoner gasped. "Before the first worlds fell. Before your corpse priests knew the great devourer had turned. Access codes." The general laughed weakly. "You cannot stop ascension." Voros looked at Farkas. The apothecary opened the traitor's abdomen with a surgical blade. He worked slowly, identifying organs aloud while preventing fatal blood loss. The general endured less than a minute. He surrendered every code he knew. When the defense nexus accepted the final command sequence, Karoli removed his helmet. The Reclusiarch's face was gaunt and scarred. His teeth had been filed into points. He cut through the general's ribs. The power scythe's edge opened the chest. Karoli reached inside, closed his fist around the beating heart, and tore it free. The attached vessels stretched, then snapped. Blood filled a black iron chalice held by a chapter serf. The general watched his own heart beat 3 times in Karoli's hand. Then his head sagged. The Reclusiarch drank first. He passed the chalice to Voros. The captain swallowed a single mouthful and handed it to the senior blooded. Each warrior accepted the blood without expression. Farkas cut strips of flesh from the traitor's chest and upper arm. The pieces were shared in ritual portions. Teeth closed upon raw meat. Blood-marked, bone-colored mouth grills. The watching guardsmen stood in silence. One vomited onto the floor. Karoli looked at him while chewing. "You consume the dead in your ration bricks," he said. "We merely honor the source." The traitor's severed head was carried to a boiling vat. The faceless moved deeper. Tamas followed an intermittent trail of blood into the astropathic sublevels. The bodies of scouts marked the path. One had been opened from throat to pelvis. Another had been folded backwards until his heels touched his shoulders. The Broodlord waited among them. It unfolded from the darkness, taller than an Astartes, its limbs ending in claws wet with the blood of neophytes. Burn scars covered one side of its head. Its eyes fixed upon Tamas with recognition. He fired. The creature crossed the chamber before the second bolt left the weapon. A claw opened Tamas from hip to ribs. He struck the wall hard enough to fracture stone. The Broodlord came after him, jaws opening. Tamas saw the Prometheum conduit above them. He ran. The creature pursued, claws striking sparks from the floor. Tamas fired into the conduit. Vapor hissed into the chamber. The Broodlord struck him again. He fell beneath the ruptured pipe. The creature loomed over him. Tamas drew a flare from his harness and crushed the igniter. Fire consumed the chamber. The blast hurled him through a doorway. His skin blistered. One ear burned away. Behind him, the Broodlord shrieked as flames stripped flesh from half its body. It did not die. It tore open the floor and escaped into the hive's foundations before Tamas could rise. He crawled to the breach and looked down into darkness. No skull waited for him. Above, the restored auger nexus awakened. Hololithic displays filled with heat returns beneath hive ossuar. Millions of them. Tunnels spread under the hive, then beyond it, branching beneath the continent towards every fortress, manufactorum, and defense line. Brood chambers pulsed in the deep earth. Dormant organisms stirred inside caverns, excavated over generations. Voros watched the map become red. The invasion had not begun in the sky. It had been waiting beneath their feet. 6 billion soldiers waited for the sky to fall. They occupied Vardos in layers of flesh, steel, and prayer. Infantry filled trench systems that crossed continents in black scars. Armored regiments stood nose to tail along highways wide enough for titans, their columns stretching beyond the horizon beneath banners stiff with chemical rain. Artillery parks covered provinces, ranked barrel beside barrel, until the guns resembled forests stripped of leaves. In the manufacturing belts, labor battalions worked without sleep. Men drove entrenching tools into slag soil until their palms split and the handles became slick with blood. When their hands failed, overseers wrapped the wounds in insulating cloth and sent them back to the defensive lines. Servitors hauled prefabricated bastions into place. Penal cohorts carried mines into fields already contaminated by spores. Priests walked among them, declaring each torn hand a tithe and each broken spine an offering upon the emperor's altar. Hive walls vanished beneath gun emplacements. Every hab-block roof carried autocannons, missile racks, or searchlights. Cathedral towers had been converted into observation posts. Statues of forgotten saints stared down upon ammunition dumps and casualty stations. Above the atmosphere, Vardos's orbital batteries rotated towards the outer system. The defense crews saw pale more before their augurs named it. Stars disappeared. The darkness spread from the system's edge like a stain soaking through parchment. At first, officers mistook it for an error in the sensorium. Then the instruments began to scream. Auspex arrays filled with returns so numerous that cogitators overheated attempting to classify them. Servitors convulsed in their restraint cradles. The Tyrannid fleet emerged as a moving eclipse. Thousands of bioships advanced around swollen hive vessels, their silhouettes vast and irregular against the stars. Feeder organisms clustered beneath them. Escort beasts moved in shoals, trailing clouds of spores and living mines. Some carried mouths broad enough to swallow frigates. Others possessed membranous fins spanning kilometers, their surfaces crawling with lesser creatures. Every organism moved with purpose. Every purpose belonged to the same hunger. The shadow in the warp reached Vardos before the first weapon fired. Inside the astropathic choirs, men began to die. They collapsed across their communion thrones, froth spilling between broken teeth. One astropath tore the silver plugs from his own skull and pushed his fingers into the sockets until they reached the brain. Another bit through his tongue while screaming prayers in voices that were not his own. Blood ran down the steps of the choir chambers and gathered around the brass feet of imperial saints. Sanctioned psychers in the surface armies clawed at their faces. Some begged officers to execute them. Others attacked comrades they believed had become alien mouths. Commissars moved through command posts with drawn pistols, killing any witch who could no longer control his power. Aboard the ships of the Imperial Navy, navigators stared into a psychic ocean without shore or depth. They saw no beacon, no path through the immaterium, only jaws layered behind jaws, and an intelligence so immense that the minds of men became sparks drowning in black water. The first navigator died aboard the cruiser Lord Solar's Wrath. His third eye opened too wide. The flesh around it tore. His skull split from brow to crown, and something invisible dragged his consciousness screaming into the dark. The Void War began before his body struck the deck. Vardos's primary defense platform released a full spread of torpedoes. Hundreds of warheads crossed the void beneath the guidance of chained machine spirits. They entered the vanguard swarm and detonated in succession, each blast flowering brighter than a city's death. Bioships burst open. Frozen ichor expanded into glittering clouds. Armor plates the size of hive districts spun away from ruined bodies. Vast organs tumbled into space, still contracting, while legions of smaller organisms poured from ruptured cavities. Imperial officers cheered. Their celebration lasted less than a minute. Feeder creatures descended upon the corpses. They tore strips from dead vessels and swallowed organs still alive with residual nerve impulses. Clouds of tiny bioforms entered the wreckage, reclaiming fluids and tissue. The dead disappeared into the mouths of the living. Nothing was wasted. Nova cannon shells crossed the system, like wrath given mass. One struck the flank of a carrier organism and penetrated deep before detonating. The creature expanded from within, its skin becoming translucent around a sun-bright core. It ruptured in a silent eruption that annihilated every organism surrounding it for hundreds of kilometers. Lances followed, spears of white fire carved through living hulls. Macro batteries thundered until ship decks shook and gun crews bled from their ears. Entire squadrons advanced behind burning torpedoes, Imperial prows cutting through clouds of spores. Then Palemore answered. Organic projectiles struck cruisers with enough force to drive through layered armor. Acid floods entered decks and dissolved men inside their uniforms. Boarding tendrils wrapped around escort vessels, pierced their hulls, and pumped warrior organisms into corridors already filled with smoke and ruptured bodies. A destroyer vanished beneath a cloud of spore mines. Its distress signal continued for 18 seconds. Men screamed of things growing inside their lungs. Then the reactor failed, and the vessel broke apart. The strike cruiser Headtaker remained beyond the main line. Captain Voros stood upon its command dais, watching the hololithic representation of the battle. Loyal ships glowed green. Tyrannid contacts burned red. The void between them had become a storm of intersecting trajectories, kill markers, and fading distress runes. Lord General Vane's voice came through the command vox from the surface. The fleet requires reinforcement. Navy Command requests that you commit your vessel to the orbital line. Voros studied the swarm. The orbital line is already dead. It is still fighting. A corpse may continue to bleed after the blade leaves it. Static crackled through Vane's reply. Then what are you looking for? The hand holding the blade. Codicier Sered stood beside him, his psychic hood alive with pale discharges. Blood had dried beneath his nostrils. The shadow pressed upon him with every passing moment, a weight without shape. There, Sered said. A cluster of forward organisms shifted across the hololith. Thousands of lesser bioships had formed around a long, armored creature moving behind the vanguard. It did not possess the mass of the hive vessels beyond it, yet the surrounding organisms altered course whenever it turned. Escort swarms tightened around its flanks, living mines repositioned to absorb incoming fire. Voros enlarged the image. A synaptic relay. More than a relay, Sered said. It is shaping the forward assault. Every organism within reach hears the greater will through it. Sergeant Bohr's voice entered the channel. Then grant First Company the kill. Voros looked towards the teleportarium status display. 30 Terminator runes waited in readiness. Boarding spread will launch first. Teleport assault follows once the torpedoes breach. The creature's interior will distort the signal. You desired first blood. Boars laughed once, a sound without humor. Accepted. The Headtaker turned. Its prow faced the Synapse ship, while Navy vessels died across the void. Defense platforms transmitted warnings. One demanded that the strike cruiser return to formation. Another threatened to classify its maneuver as abandonment of station. Voros ignored them. Launch! Boarding torpedoes fired from the cruiser's flanks. They accelerated beneath plumes of burning propellant, black-armored projectiles bearing the white skull sigil of the Mortifactors. Tyrannid organisms moved to intercept. Point defense batteries aboard the Headtaker opened fire, heavy shells reducing spore mines to wet explosions. 3 torpedoes vanished. 5 struck the Synapse ship. Their adamantium prows penetrated armor and flesh, driving through layers of tissue before explosive charges opened their assault ramps. Mortifactors emerged into a living world. Voros entered through the first breach. The torpedo had embedded itself in a chamber filled with translucent sacs. Fluids pulsed through membranes beneath his boots. The air was hot, wet, and poisonous. His armor's filters sealed as spores thickened around him like dust. Third Company spread into firing formation. The chamber contracted. Muscular walls folded around the boarding torpedo, swallowing its rear section. Flesh grew across the breach in thick ropes. Within seconds, the path back to the void disappeared beneath a glistening seal. "The beast closes the wound," Karoli said. Voros raised his bolter. "Then we become the infection." Teleport lightning filled a passage beyond the chamber. First Company arrived inside blue-white fire. Terminators materialized knee-deep in organic fluid, their massive tactical dreadnought plate grinding against the tunnel walls. Sergeant Bors appeared at their center, with a storm bolter fixed to one fist and a power fist surrounding the other. The tunnel convulsed. Flesh closed around several warriors before they could move. Armor joints groaned beneath crushing pressure. Bors drove his power fist into the wall and tore sideways, ripping open muscle in a flood of black blood. "Advance," he ordered. The Terminators advanced. Their storm bolters turned the passage into a slaughter channel. Tyranid warriors came through sphincter-like openings ahead, their carapaces slick with embryonic fluid. The first raised a death spitter. Bors fired before the symbiotic weapon opened its mouth. Bolts struck the creature's chest and detonated beneath the armor. Its ribs burst outward. Fragments of lung and secondary heart struck the walls. A second warrior vaulted over the carcass and drove a bone sword into a Terminator's shoulder. The blade penetrated ceramite and severed the warrior's arm. He did not fall. The Terminator caught the Tyranid by the throat with his remaining hand and crushed until the neck collapsed. Alien eyes burst beneath the pressure. The head remained attached by cords of tissue. Another Mortifactor seized the corpse and used it as a shield against living ammunition. Beetle-like projectiles struck the dead warrior, chewed into its flesh, and exploded in sprays of acid. The tunnel narrowed. Bors forced his way forward. His pauldrons stripped skin from the walls. Blood poured down his armor. Tendrils emerged from the ceiling and wrapped around his limbs. He tore them free, dragging organs loose with them. "Door," one Terminator voxed. Ahead, the passage ended in a ring of contracted muscle. Bors struck it with his power fist. The first blow cratered the flesh. The second broke through. The third opened the sphincter door wide enough for the squad to pass. Pressure released from beyond it. A chamber-sized organ ruptured. Acidic fluid engulfed the Terminators. Warning runes filled their visors. Armor seals hissed. One warrior vanished beneath the flood, then rose again carrying the severed head of a Tyranid warrior in one hand. "Unworthy," he said, and threw it aside. The bioship responded to the invasion. New defenders grew around them. Walls split open. Half-formed gaunts spilled from gestation membranes, their bodies pale and soft, limbs still twisting into shape. They attacked before their eyes had opened. One crawled beneath a Terminator's guard and bit through a knee seal. Another clawed its way from the floor inside a warrior's stance and buried its talons in the softer armor around the groin. The Mortifactor seized it by the spine and tore it in half. Karoli entered the chamber behind the First Company. Final benediction ignited. Its blade cut through gaunts, warriors, and the ship's own flesh. Each swing opened bodies from shoulder to pelvis. Alien organs slapped against the walls. Heads struck the floor, still snapping their jaws. "Cut towards the thought," Karoli said. Serid knew the path. He felt the synapse vessel around him as a fragment of a greater mind. Its awareness was not contained within a skull. It lived through every nerve conduit, every sensory blister, and every organism gestating in its chambers. Pain spread through it without panic. Damage became information. Every dead defender taught the next how the Mortifactors killed. Serid reached deeper. The shadow crushed against his psychic barriers. For an instant, he ceased to stand within the bioship. He saw Pozzel. The night world existed again beneath him. Its black forests spread beneath storm clouds. Tribal fires burned across the plains. Men hunted by scent and sound. carrying bone knives and trophies taken from defeated enemies. Then the sky filled with teeth. Capillary towers rose from the earth. Oceans climbed towards the heavens. Forests dissolved into nutrient slurry. Pozulan tribes fought with spears and stolen laser guns, while gaunts poured over them in endless waves. Sered felt their bodies consumed. He followed their matter into digestion pools. He felt muscle broken into proteins, bone reduced into mineral paste, blood separated into useful compounds. The essence of Pozul entered reclamation organisms, feeder ships, and embryonic chambers. It had never vanished. It had merely changed shape. Sered opened his eyes. A Tyrannid warrior charged him. He raised one hand. Psychic force struck the creature, peeled its carapace from its torso, and hurled the exposed body against the wall. It burst upon impact, leaving its organs hanging in a red fan. "Their flesh," Sered voxed. "Some of them carry Pozul within them." Silence answered him. Then ancient Odon roared. The dreadnought had been ordered to hold the boarding breach. He abandoned it. He smashed through the living. Passages, each step pulping immature organisms beneath his feet. The onslaught cannon fixed to his arm spun to full speed. Its barrels filled the tunnel with thunder. Rounds tore through gestation sacs. Embryonic tyrannids burst before birth. Fluids and malformed limbs sprayed across Odon's sarcophagus. He entered a brood chamber, where hundreds of warrior organisms hung within membranes connected to the ceiling by umbilical cords. Odon opened fire. "Tribe Varkesh," he roared. A line of sacs disintegrated. "Tribe Morga." More organisms came apart, their soft skulls bursting beneath the shells. "Tribe Solk." His power fist closed around a developing carnifex. The creature's armor had not hardened. Odon squeezed until ribs, organs, and unfinished weapon symbiotes erupted between his fingers. "Tribe Karad." The chamber filled with shreds of alien meat. "You ate them," Odon bellowed into the ship's mind. "Now remember their names." Sered felt the bioship register the dreadnought's rage. It possessed no understanding of grief. It recognized only aggression, resistance, and biomass expenditure. That made the insult worse. The path to the primary nerve cluster opened through layers of contracting tissue. Bors led the first company into the narrowing passage, while Voros, Sered, and Karoli followed with the melter charges. The ship knew where they were going. Warriors came in disciplined broods. Raveners tore through the walls and struck from the flanks. Smaller organisms swarmed across the ceiling, dropping onto Terminator plate and forcing talons into vision slits. Bors held the passage. "Place the charges," he ordered. Voros did not argue. The nerve chamber pulsed beyond him. It was larger than a cathedral nave, filled with folds of grey matter suspended in amniotic fluid. Veins as thick as transit tunnels fed the immense brain. Psychic light moved across its surface in patterns painful to witness. Mortifactors planted melter charges around the central mass. Behind them, Bors killed. His storm bolter ran empty. He discarded it and used his power fist. A warrior lunged through the narrowing tunnel. Bors caught its bone sword, allowed the blade to cut through his palm, then closed his fist around the weapon and snapped it. He drove the broken blade through the creature's face. Another seized him from behind. Its claws scraped across Terminator plate, searching for a joint. Bors thrust backwards against the wall and crushed the beast between ceramite and muscle. "Charges armed," Voros voxed. "Then leave." Bors remained until every other warrior had withdrawn. He walked backwards through the passage, striking down anything that followed. Blood coated his armor so thickly that its colors disappeared beneath black-red slime. The melter charges detonated. White fire consumed the nerve cluster. The bioship screamed. The sound did not pass through air. It entered every living mind within reach. Mortifactors staggered. Men aboard Imperial ships cried out. Psychers on Vardos died with smoke rising from their mouths. Across the void, the vanguard swarm lost cohesion. Thousands of airborne organisms ceased moving. Gargoyle clouds fell from the upper atmosphere. Escort beasts drifted away from attack vectors. Living mines turned upon one another, detonating in chains of wet fire. Imperial guns seized the opening. Lances cut through confused bioships. Torpedoes entered unprotected flanks. Navy captains shouted of victory, while the burning Synapse vessel broke apart around the Mortifactors. Voros returned to the head-taker by teleport flare, moments before the creature's death throes crushed the boarding chambers shut. The triumph lasted 7 minutes. Then Pale Moor released another wave. Millions of spores detached from the hive vessels. They spread before the fleet in a living shield, absorbing lance fire, torpedoes and macro shells. Defense platforms fired until their magazines ran dry. Gun barrels glowed. Ammunition hoists jammed beneath the pace of loading. Within the first 3 hours, Vardos expended nearly half the munitions stored across its orbital grid. The Tyranids continued forward. They had not failed to understand the Imperial guns. They had measured them. Voros watched the ammunition tallies fall as something immense detached from the heart of Pale Moor. At first, the hololith could not resolve its size. The organism resembled a moon wrapped in armor, its surface cratered with feeding vents and weapon cavities. Smaller creatures clung to it in swarms. It accelerated towards Vardos's primary orbital ring. Navy ships fired everything they possessed. The organism did not turn. It struck the ring head-on. Metal folded around living mass. Habitation sectors, manufactorums and defense emplacements broke apart across thousands of kilometers. Reactors burst. Entire districts spun free, burning as gravity seized them. A section of the ring wider than a hive city began to fall. Its descent path appeared upon the head-taker's strategium. Hive Ossuar glowed beneath it. The fragment carried enough mass to flatten the hive, rupture the mantle beneath it, and split the continent open like a skull beneath a power maul. The fragment did not strike Hive Ossuar. Vardos's surviving orbital batteries denied it that mercy. Lance fire carved glowing ravines through the falling mass. Macro shells burst against districts of twisted plasteel and dead manufactorums, breaking towers from the descending wreckage. Defense lasers burned continuously until their focusing arrays melted and their crews cooked inside sealed emplacements. The bombardment altered the fragment's course by less than a degree. It was enough. The broken section of orbital ring crossed the horizon beyond Hive Ossuar and struck the continent 200 kilometers from the outer defensive wall. For an instant, night ceased to exist. A white radiance swallowed the landscape. Shadows burned themselves into the earth behind tanks, bunkers, and men. Exposed soldiers became translucent shapes in the glare, bones visible through flesh before both were reduced to vapor. Armored columns lifted from the ground. Lehman Russ battle tanks rolled through the air like discarded toys, turrets torn from hulls, crews liquefied within their restraint harnesses. The crust opened. Millions of tons of iron, stone, and orbital wreckage buried themselves in the planet. The impact threw a crown of molten debris into the upper atmosphere. Fire raced outward in a circular wall, overtaking fleeing aircraft and swallowing trench systems before warning signals reached them. The first defensive line ceased to exist. Infantry vanished beneath the blast. Men inside reinforced bunkers were hammered into paste against the inner walls. Those farther away survived the pressure wave, only to drown as ruptured fuel reservoirs and subterranean water mains flooded their positions with burning liquid. Hive Ossuar endured behind its void shields. The shields flared until the entire hive appeared encased in blue-white flame. Towers shook, windows burst, habitation spires bent upon their foundations. Hundreds of shield technicians died at their consoles as power surged through the network and burned their nervous systems from their bodies. Captain Voros watched the artificial sunrise through the forward viewport of a descending Thunderhawk. The gunship bucked in the shockwave. Warning runes filled his retinal display. A crew serf struck the restraint frame hard enough to break his neck, then hung there while blood floated in beads around his face. Reclusiarch Caroly watched the burning horizon. "A fitting dawn," he said. Voros did not answer. The orbital fragment had killed millions before the Tyranids reached the ground. Pale Moor began its invasion, while the continent was still moving. Mycetic spores struck in storms. They hammered into plains, fortifications, and manufacturum districts. Some exploded upon impact, releasing clouds of corrosive organisms. Others split along pulsing seams and opened like rotten fruit. Termagants poured from them first. They came in broods beyond counting. Their flesh borers fused to their forelimbs, the living weapons convulsing as they spat beetle-like ammunition. The projectiles burrowed through flak armor and tunneled into bodies, chewing through organs before bursting from backs and throats. Hormagaunts followed. They moved as a tide of claws and bone, racing upon one another when the press became too dense. The foremost creatures were trampled flat. Those behind crossed over the pulped remains without slowing. Trenches disappeared beneath them. Men fired until ammunition failed, then vanished under masses of shrieking bodies. Tyranid warriors emerged from the larger spores, carapaced giants carrying venom cannons, death spitters and blades grown from living bone. Their presence imposed order upon the swarm. Broods altered direction without signals. Gaunts abandoned wounded prey and turned towards artillery emplacements, vox stations, and command bunkers. The skies became black with gargoyles. They descended upon anti-aircraft positions, biting through exposed throats and blinding gunners with streams of burning venom. Hydra batteries fired into the swarms until their ammunition feeds ran empty. Winged corpses fell in sheets and buried the gun platforms beneath alien flesh. The earth betrayed the defenders next. Raveners erupted inside trench systems, their serpentine bodies smashing through reinforced flooring. They killed with talons and tails, moving too quickly for mortal eyes. Trigons rose beneath command compounds, splitting bunkers apart upon their armored backs and flinging officers into the air amid slabs of ferrocrete. Across Vardos, the Imperial artillery received permission to fire. The planet answered with thunder. Earthshaker batteries discharged in ordered sequence, their recoil shaking entire districts. Manticore rockets crossed the sky, trailing smoke and scripture. Medusa siege guns fired shells that turned fortified ridges into craters. Plasma warheads descended into the swarm and opened spheres of blue fire that stripped flesh from bone. The bombardment grew until the atmosphere changed beneath it. Pressure fronts collided above the continents. Clouds formed around columns of superheated air. Chemical rain fell upward for several seconds as repeated detonations created localized storms. The guns fired through their own smoke, guided by auger coordinates and the last reports of observers already dead. Tyranid broods disappeared beneath the barrage. Gaunts were shredded into sprays of chitin, muscle, and black blood. Warriors burst apart under direct hits, their organs scattered across hundreds of meters. A Carnifex vanished beneath a storm of armor-piercing shells, leaving only its lower limbs standing in a crater filled with boiling tissue. Hundreds of millions died. The bombardment layered the ground with alien meat. Bodies covered bodies until trenches filled, and craters became lakes of ichor. Tyranids still advanced. They climbed over the steaming remains of earlier broods, slipping upon exposed organs, tearing through heaps of their own dead to reach the human lines. Voros watched ammunition counters fall across the command display. Lord General Vane spoke through the Vox from Hive Ossuar. The northern armies require immediate reinforcement. 3 trench groups are already overrun. They require targets, Voros said. They require Astartes. A bolter shell spent upon a gaunt purchases less than a guardsman's life. Vane's voice hardened. Those guardsmen are losing the line. The line exists to reveal what commands the swarm. Voros enlarged the Auspex returns. Psychic signatures glowed through the Tyranid mass. Hive tyrants moved behind the first waves. Warrior broods maintained synaptic control along the flanks. Something bloated and floating directed attacks upon the artillery parks through pulses of psychic pressure. "Kill teams," Voros said. "Prepare for decapitation strikes." Thunderhawks left the shelter of Hive Ossuar in staggered formation. They flew low above burning trenches, their engines throwing corpses aside. Gunships passed over seas of gaunts and did not fire. The creatures leapt towards them, talons scraping armor before the slipstream tore them away. The first Hive tyrant stood upon a ridge made from destroyed tanks. It possessed 4 arms, a heavy venom cannon, and a sword grown from bone. Tyrannid warriors gathered around it. The gaunt tide moved according to every turn of its head. Voros's Thunderhawk climbed. The assault ramp opened. Mortifactors stepped into empty air. Jump packs ignited. Black and bone warriors descended through gunsmoke. Bolters aimed downward. Mass reactive shells struck the tyrant's guard. Warrior organisms burst from within, fragments of carapace passing through neighboring creatures like shrapnel. Karoli landed upon the ridge. Final benediction met the Hive tyrant's blade. Power fields collided in a flash that blinded nearby soldiers. The tyrant struck again, faster than its size permitted. Karoli turned the blow and drove the scythe's haft into the creature's jaw. Voros fired into one of its knees. Bolts detonated. Beneath the carapace, the leg folded. Karoli's next stroke entered beneath the tyrant's lower jaw and emerged through the crown. The head came free, trailing nerve cords and black blood. The effect spread through the valley. Gaunts stopped mid-charge. Some attacked one another. Others fled from gunfire or crouched among corpses, hissing without direction. Imperial artillery transformed the confusion into slaughter. Shells fell upon the disordered swarm. Thousands of creatures vanished beneath each impact. The Tyrannids regained control only when another synapse brood moved into range. Elsewhere, Mortifactors struck neurotyrants with melter weapons, assaulted warrior nodes from drop pods, and used grav chutes to descend behind synaptic formations. They did not hold ground. They appeared, killed the controlling organisms, and withdrew before the swarm closed around them. Every execution purchased minutes. The Imperial armies spent those minutes in blood. The Vardosian 9th Armored Infantry broke in the Chemris sector. 3 trigons erupted beneath its command bunkers. The first tore through a strategium and emerged with half the structure hanging from its talons. The second struck an ammunition depot. Stored shells cooked off in a chain of explosions that annihilated 6 companies. The regiment's command vox died. Panic passed through the line faster than orders. Tens of thousands abandoned their trenches. Soldiers threw aside weapons and climbed over one another to reach the rear roads. Officers fired pistols into the fleeing masses until they were trampled or dragged along with them. Voros landed before the retreating regiment. His drop pod struck the roadway and killed 40 soldiers beneath its armored base. Petals opened. He stepped into a flood of men running from the front. The regimental commander rode among them in a chimera, shouting conflicting orders through an external vox horn. Voros raised his bolter. One round entered through the chimera's vision slit. The commander's head detonated inside the troop compartment. Bone fragments and brain tissue painted the vehicle's interior. The driver recoiled, lost control, and drove into a drainage trench. Voros opened every surviving vox channel. "Return to your positions." Some soldiers stopped. Others continued running. Mortifactors emerged from the smoke behind him and fired. Bolter rounds struck fleeing men in the back. Bodies opened violently, showering those ahead with blood and shredded organs. A dozen soldiers became 100 dead. The retreat slowed beneath the weight of corpses. Voros pointed towards the trigons. "Turn your weapons upon the enemy, or we will build the next wall from you." The survivors returned to the trenches. The dead did become a wall. Mortifactors and labor servitors dragged the bodies into a collapsed roadway and stacked them beneath sheets of armor plating. Men who had fled minutes earlier fired over the boots, hands and open faces of their comrades. By the following hour, Colonel Dravis Cord understood the shape of Voros's war. The valley of St. Orphiel extended between two slag mountain chains west of Hive Ossuar. 400 million soldiers occupied its trench belts, bunkers, and artillery terraces. Armored reserves waited at both mouths of the valley. Cord studied the tactical hololith inside his command chimera. Mortifactors had entered the surrounding high ground. Tech-Marine Vask's serfs were placing charges in abandoned Prometheum conduits. Demolition teams carried fracture mines into faults beneath the valley walls. Cord opened a secure channel. "You are mining our withdrawal routes," Voros answered from the ridge above. "Yes. The eastern mouth is our supply corridor. It is now a containment point." Cord stared at the massed Imperial formations represented below him. 400 million soldiers are inside this valley. They are visible. You intend to trap the swarm here. I intend to concentrate it, with my armies still inside. The Tyranids will not fully commit if the prey escapes. Cord's fist struck the Chimera's command console. "My men are not bait. Everything with blood is bait to Pale Moor. You are asking them to remain until the swarm closes. I am ordering it." Silence passed between them. Cord looked through the vision block. Infantry filled every approach. Many had not slept since the bombardment began. Some crouched beside weapons with bandaged hands. Others prayed over their last magazines. "What happens when your trap closes?" he asked. "You die usefully." The channel ended. Reclusiarch Caroli entered the trenches before the first Tyranids reached the valley. He walked without an honor guard. Shells crossed the sky above him. Soldiers pressed against revetments as the bone-faced giant passed, expecting promises of relief or tales of victory. Caroli offered neither. He climbed upon the burned hull of a Lehman Russ and opened the local Vox network. "Soldiers of Vardos." Gunfire and distant shrieking continued beneath his words. "The Emperor has already spent your lives." Faces turned towards him. "He did not send you here to survive. He did not place rifles in your hands so that you might return to your manufactorums, your hab cells, or your families. You stand here because your blood has value only when poured upon the correct ground." Some men lowered their heads. Others stared with hatred. Caroli raised final benediction. "The Devourer comes. It will take your flesh, sift your bones, and fashion new abominations from whatever remains. Deny it. Make every mouth choke. Make every claw purchase a corpse. Make your death so costly that the enemy remembers mankind as poison." A soldier began striking his rifle against the trench wall. Others joined him. The rhythm spread through the line. Rifle stocks hammered ferrocrete. Tank crews sounded horns. Artillerymen struck loading tools against gun shields. Caroli's voice rose above them. "You have no rescue." The soldiers roared. "You have no retreat." The roar grew. "You have only the worth of your ending." Across the valley, hundreds of millions prepared to die. The Tyranids entered from the west. They came first as a black tide, then as a continent of moving flesh. Gaunts filled the valley floor. Warriors advanced behind them. Carnifex broods smashed through defensive positions and opened paths for the creatures following. Imperial guns fired until barrels warped. Infantry disappeared beneath the swarm. Tanks continued shooting while gaunts crawled over their hulls and tore through hatches. Artillery crews depressed their guns and fired directly into masses only meters away. More Tyranids entered. 1 billion, then 2. The western valley mouth vanished beneath them. The eastern formations began to collapse. Colonel Cord ordered reserve regiments forward, knowing they had nowhere else to go. Voros waited upon the ridge. Synaptic organisms filled the valley. Feeder broods followed. Pale Moor believed the prey had been trapped. It was correct. "Seal the grave," Voros said. The Mortifactors detonated the eastern charges. Mountainsides collapsed into the withdrawal corridor. Tanks, soldiers, and Tyranids disappeared beneath millions of tons of rock. The western fracture mines followed. The earth broke. Promethium reservoirs ruptured beneath the valley. Burning fuel erupted through trenches, bunkers, and corpse-filled craters. The flame front moved faster than men could run. Soldiers ignited inside their uniforms. Skin peeled from faces. Eyes burst. Tyranids thrashed as internal fluids boiled and carapaces cracked from expanding steam. The valley floor collapsed into the excavated faults. Entire armies fell. Cord's chimera lifted upon the pressure wave. It turned through the air, struck a ridge, and rolled until its armor split. Men inside became loose flesh between steel surfaces. Cord regained consciousness, half outside the rear hatch. His left leg bent in 2 places. Burning bodies lay around him. The valley below had become a furnace filled with writhing shapes. 400 million soldiers were gone. Several billion Tyranids burned with them. The feast began after the fire weakened. Mortifactors descended into the scorched valley. They killed wounded hybrids with blades to preserve ammunition. Worthy skulls were removed from cult commanders who had guided Tyranid organisms through hidden passages. The chapter did not consume alien flesh. Tyranid tissue belonged to no warrior. It carried no honor, memory, or soul worth inheriting. Human traitors were different. Carolee opened a cult leader from throat to groin. Chapter serfs caught the blood in iron vessels. Senior warriors drank beneath a sky raining ash and burning spores. Flesh was cut from the dead and shared in small portions. Guardsmen watched without speaking. Apothecary Farkas worked beside a shattered carnifex. The organism still lived. 3 limbs were gone. Half its face had burned away. Restraint spikes pinned it to the ground, while its surviving eye followed every movement. Farkas cut through the blackened carapace. Beneath it lay a new layer of tissue, pale, dense, and slick with insulating fluid. He removed a section and held it beneath his armor's lumen. The flesh did not char when exposed to the flame of his surgical burner. Voros stood over him. "This organism entered the valley before detonation," Farkas said. "The layer was not present when the first barrage struck." "It grew during the battle?" "Yes." Around them, the valley still burned. Farkas looked towards the dark sky, where fresh spores were already falling. "The next generation will not burn so easily." The road to Generator Bastion 9 was paved with the dead. They lay between the ruined hab blocks in drifts high enough to hide battle tanks. Vardosian soldiers, cult insurgents, and Tyranid organisms had been crushed together beneath collapsing towers and artillery fire until species became difficult to distinguish. Black carapace protruded from human viscera. Hands still gripped lasguns beneath heaps of severed alien limbs. Chemical rain ran through the remains in steaming rivulets, carrying blood towards drains already clogged with flesh. The Mortifactors advanced through the canyon of ruins. Land raiders formed the armored spearhead, their slab-sided hulls painted black and corpse white beneath layers of soot. Lascanon arrays tracked the upper ruins, while hurricane bolters raked the roadway. Repulsor executioners followed above the shattered ground, their gravitic impellers hurling dust, loose bones, and fragments of armor against the walls. Predators guarded the flanks. Vindicators ground forward behind dozer blades crusted with meat. 3 dreadnoughts walked among them. Ancient Odon strode at the column's head. Tech Marine Vask had removed the onslaught cannon damaged during the assault upon the Synapse vessel and replaced it with a macroplasma incinerator taken from the Basilica Mortis's oldest reserve vault. The weapon's coils burned blue behind its armored casing. Heat shimmered around the barrel. Pozzolan finger bones rattled against Odin's sarcophagus with every step. Beyond the city, billions fought across plains hidden behind walls of smoke. Artillery flashed along the horizon without pause. Armored formations crossed burning fields in columns hundreds of kilometers long. Entire regiments vanished beneath Tyranid swarms, while fresh armies advanced through their wreckage. None of them mattered if the continental shields failed. Generator Bastion 9 fed power into a network protecting Hive Ossuar, 3 manufacturing provinces, and the primary macro shell foundries. Its shield output had fallen by almost half. Internal augurs had gone silent. Cult activity beneath its foundations had opened a path for Genestealers. Voros watched the Bastion's rune pulse amber within his tactical display. "Enemy concentration ahead," Vask transmitted. His voice came through layers of encrypted Binharic cant, each machine phrase translated by Voros's armor into clipped low Gothic. Carnifex organisms, Tervigon broodmothers, synaptic presence confirmed. Voros raised one fist. The armored column divided. Predators entered side avenues, while repulsor executioners climbed above wreckage that trapped the tracked vehicles. Vindicators formed a firing line behind the land raiders. Dreadnoughts moved into the spaces between them. Vask's Binharic commands passed through the armor. Machine spirits awakened to wrath. The first Carnifex came through a hab-block wall. It carried the building around its shoulders for several paces, ferrocrete and bodies sliding from its carapace. Its forelimbs ended in crushing claws stained with tank oil. A symbiotic cannon opened beneath its ribs and spat a mass of living ammunition. The projectile struck the lead land raider. Armor buckled. Acid spread across the glacis, eating through sacred paint, devotional scrolls, and the first layer of ceramite. Warning sigils flared within the tank. The land raider answered with both lascannons. Ruby beams crossed the street and struck the Carnifex beneath its armored crest. The first blast drilled through carapace. The second entered the molten cavity and exited through the creature's back. The Carnifex remained standing. A predator fired. Autocannon shells hammered the exposed wound, burst inside the torso, and tore the beast apart from within. Its abdomen ruptured. Ropes of intestine and shattered secondary organs spilled across the road. The creature took 2 more steps before collapsing beneath its own weight. Gaunts poured around it. Heavy bolters opened fire. The street became a storm of explosive rounds. Gaunts disintegrated in running strides. Heads burst. Rib cages opened. Limbs spun into the air and struck the ruined walls. The creatures behind climbed over the scraps, only to be reduced in turn. Vask altered the fire pattern. Vindicators advanced. Their demolisher cannons fired as one. The shells struck among 3 swollen Tervigons, moving behind the gaunt broods. One warhead entered the first creature's distended abdomen before detonating. The brood mother burst like a diseased organ. Unborn gaunts, embryonic fluid and pulped viscera spread across the avenue in a wave. The second Tervigon lost its forequarters. Its swollen belly split upon impact, releasing half-grown organisms that writhed blindly in the blood. The third survived. It gave birth while advancing. Its abdominal canal opened and expelled a mass of gaunts onto the road. Several had fused limbs. One possessed no head. All attacked. The repulsor executioners descended. Heavy laser destroyers burned through the Tervigon's chest. Macroplasma fire followed, turning its internal cavity into a furnace. The brood mother collapsed upon its offspring and cooked them beneath its carcass. The Tyranids answered with acid. Venom cannons struck the predators. Bioplasma splashed across a Vindicator's frontal armor and melted through the track assembly. The siege tank slewed sideways, crushing infantry beneath its hull. Feeder organisms crawled from drainage trenches. They were smaller than gaunts, pale and blind, with circular mouths filled by rasping teeth. They climbed over the immobilized Vindicator and entered the track housings. Some forced themselves through damage around the engine vents. Others found a ruptured crew hatch. The men inside screamed over the vehicle channel. Vask heard them. He sent an ignition command. The Vindicator's fuel cells overloaded. The tank detonated, destroying itself, its wounded crew, and every feeder organism covering the hull. "No flesh for the Devourer," Vask said. Ancient Odon charged beyond the firing line. A screamer killer emerged from the smoke to meet him. The organism towered above the dreadnought, its 4 scything talons raised. Bioplasma gathered within its mouth, illuminating strands of saliva and teeth. Odin fired first. The macroplasma incinerator discharged with the fury of a captured star. Blue-white energy struck the screamer killer in the torso. Carapace vanished. Flesh flashed into vapor. The creature's chest became a cavity filled with steaming organs and blackened ribs. It screamed. Odin entered the sound. The first talon struck his shoulder and gouged through armor. The second scraped across his sarcophagus. Odin caught the creature's lower limb in his power fist. He twisted. The joint tore free. Tendons snapped. Dark blood sprayed across his chassis. The screamer killer lunged with its remaining claws. Odin stepped beneath them and drove his armored brow into the creature's ruined chest. Ribs broke around the dreadnought's hull. He pushed until the Tyranid fell backwards beneath him. Then he stamped upon its skull. The head split. Brain matter squeezed between plates of carapace and spread across the road. Gaunts swarmed Odin before he could advance. They climbed his legs, forced claws into armor seams, and covered his weapons. Several reached the sarcophagus and scraped at the vision slit. Odin turned towards the shell of a ruined cathedral. Its statues had been broken by bombardment. A stone emperor stood headless above doors, filled with corpses. Odin drove himself against the wall. Gaunts burst between ceramite and stone. He scraped his entire side along the cathedral, walking forward while bodies pulped against the masonry. Alien blood painted the wall in a continuous black-red band. Limbs and sections of crushed carapace dropped behind him for nearly a kilometer. When the last gaunt fell away, Odin turned back towards the battle. "I have worn worse cloaks," he growled. Far beneath the armored advance, the Faceless hunted alone. Scout Sergeant Vardus had given him no squad, no supporting fire, and no promise of recovery. "Find the burned one," Vardus had said. "The creature knows the paths beneath the bastion. Follow it." The Faceless, who had once possessed the name Tamas, entered the collapsed transit tunnels, carrying a bolt carbine, combat blade, and 3 grenades. Burned skin tightened across one side of his face. His missing ear had been sealed beneath a black dressing. He followed scorched chitin through the dark. The Broodlord had left blood upon support pillars and maintenance ladders. The trail descended towards Generator Bastion 9, passing abandoned cult shrines and chambers filled with gnawed human bones. The creature knew he followed. It began leaving messages. The first corpse hung upside down from a conduit. Its abdomen opened, and its organs arranged around its head like a ritual crown. The second had been flensed. Its skull rested upon its chest. Finger bones had been driven into the eye sockets. The third was a dead scout. His severed head had been placed between his hands in imitation of a postulan offering posture, taught during the neophytes' hypno-indoctrination. The Faceless knelt beside him. The Broodlord had witnessed Mortificator rites through the cult's shared memory. It had taken what it saw and shaped mockery from it. The neophyte removed the scout's progenoid glands with an emergency blade. He placed them in a sealed pouch. Then he continued. Above him, the armored column reached Generator Bastion 9. The fortress rose from the ruins like a clenched iron fist. Shield pylons surrounded its central reactor tower. Electrical discharges crawled over the upper battlements. The main gates stood open. No defenders waited outside. Voros entered at the head of 3rd Company. The first body hung from the inner wall. A Vardosian officer had been cocooned in translucent resin. His eyes moved behind the membrane. His mouth opened and closed, but the material filled his lungs and denied him sound. Thousands more covered the walls. Soldiers, engineers, and laborers had been bound alive into the structure. Some still struggled. Others had been opened so feeder organisms could enter their bodies without killing them. Shapes moved beneath swollen skin. Karoli studied them. "The cult has made an altar. It has made insulation," Farkas said. "The living bodies conceal thermal returns from the augurs." Voros looked towards the reactor access. "Purge every chamber." Vask's voice came through the Vox. "Heavy weapons risk damage to the plasma regulators." "Blades only." The Mortifactors advanced. Genestealers came through the maintenance conduits. They struck without warning, pale forms unfolding from darkness. One landed upon a battle brother and drove 4 claws through his breastplate. Ceramite split. Both hearts burst beneath the talons. Another seized a Mortifactor's arm and tore it from the shoulder. Blood sprayed across the reactor gallery. The warrior staggered, but did not fall. He caught the severed limb before it struck the floor, turned it by the wrist, and swung it against the Genestealer's skull. The gauntlet broke the creature's jaw. He struck again. The corpse-white fist crushed one eye. A third blow collapsed the skull. The Genestealer fell twitching, while the Mortifactor continued beating it with his own arm until Caroli dragged him back towards Apothecary Farkas. Chainswords filled the galleries with metallic shrieking. Their teeth entered Genestealer torsos and threw strips of flesh across pipes and control panels. Combat blades found joints beneath carapace. Armored fists broke ribs and necks. One warrior lost his helmet to a claw, bit into the throat of the creature clinging to him, and tore away a mouthful of muscle before driving his knife through its palate. Bolters remained locked to armor. One misplaced shell could rupture a coolant line or shatter a plasma manifold. The battle became intimate. Black and bone giants grappled with purple horrors beneath emergency lumens, while the reactor throbbed behind the walls. The faceless reached the coolant chamber alone. Mist filled the circular vault. Vast conduits crossed above pools of chemically treated water. The floor trembled beneath the machinery of the Continental Shield Network. He saw the Broodlord's reflection before he saw the creature. It descended behind him. The first claw opened his back. He turned and fired. Bolt rounds struck carapace already blackened by the promethium fire, but the creature moved aside before they detonated deeply enough to kill. It remembered his weapon. The Broodlord struck the carbine from his hands. The Faceless drew his blade. The creature came forward with ruined flesh, covering one side of its skull. One eye had burned away. The surviving eye held no rage. It held recognition. The neophyte attacked. His blade scraped across the Broodlord's ribs. A claw caught him beneath the jaw and hurled him into a coolant pipe. He rose before the creature reached him. Again, he struck. Again, the Broodlord turned the blade. Its lower arm drove through his abdomen. The claw emerged from his back, carrying loops of intestine and dark blood. The Faceless screamed. He forced himself forward along the limb. The Broodlord pulled, attempting to tear him open. He dropped his weight and trapped the arm beneath his body, pinning it between himself and the metal floor. The creature shrieked. The neophyte drew a crack grenade. He rammed it into the burned cavity beneath the Broodlord's ribs. The creature struck his face. Claws tore his cheek open to the teeth. The grenade armed. The Faceless locked both arms around the creature's limb and whispered through blood, "Your skull is mine." The detonation filled the coolant chamber. The Broodlord's torso burst apart. Bone, organs, and burning carapace struck the conduits. The blast threw the Faceless across the floor. His trapped abdomen tore wider, spilling blood and bowel beneath him. He remained conscious. The Broodlord remained alive. Half its body dragged itself towards an open conduit. Its surviving limbs clawed at the floor. The head turned, the remaining eye fixed upon him. The Faceless crawled after it. He recovered his combat blade and struck the neck. Once, twice. The carapace resisted. He struck until his wrist fractured and the blade edge bent. On the final blow, the spine separated. The head rolled into the coolant mist. He seized it before darkness took him. Reclusiarch Caroli performed the blooding, while Generator Bastion 9 shook beneath renewed bombardment. Apothecary Farkas had closed the neophyte's abdomen with staples and coagulant foam. Blood still ran between the plates of newly fitted scout armor. The warrior stood only because 2 serfs supported him from behind. The Broodlord's skull had been flensed. Caroli lowered it over the neophyte's first helmet. The bone rested upon black ceramite like a second face. The gathered Mortifactors turned towards him. For the first time since the rites began, they acknowledged his existence. Carolee placed one bloodied hand upon the helmet. "Speak the name buried beneath your weakness." The warrior's voice emerged through the grill. "Tamas." Carolee looked to the blooded. They struck fists against breastplates. "Tamas," they said. The name rolled through the generator hall like distant thunder. A wounded scout lay nearby. His legs were gone. One lung had collapsed. Farkas had already judged him beyond recovery. No worthy trophy rested beside him. Carolee handed Tamas a bolt pistol. "Your first duty among the blooded." Tamas limped towards the dying neophyte. The scout looked up at him. No plea came. Tamas placed the pistol against his brow. "Go faceless into the dark," he said. He fired. The skull opened against the floor. Generator Bastion 9 returned to full output. Shield pylons ignited across the continent. A dome of force spread above Hive Ossuar and the surrounding Manufacturing provinces moments before the next spore wave entered the atmosphere. Millions of mycetic organisms struck the void shield. They vaporized upon contact. The sky became an ocean of fire. Burning meat, blackened carapace, and molten biological fluids spread across the shield's surface before sliding away in incandescent streams. When the remains fell beyond the barrier, they descended as greasy black snow. Serid stood upon the fortress battlements. He watched fragments of tyrannid flesh burn through the poisoned clouds. Then the librarian stiffened. Something had entered the psychic pressure above Vardos. It was not a diffuse, synaptic command. It was not the blunt will of a hive tyrant or the vast, distant hunger of Pale Moor. This presence was narrow, honed, directed with the precision of a blade thrust through armor seals. A single thought descended through the storm. It possessed no words. It possessed a target. Serid turned towards Captain Voros. "The fleet has learned your name." The Auspex revealed a second Vardos beneath the first. It spread below the capital continent in infected strata, a hidden empire excavated through centuries of loyal ignorance. Transit arteries ran beneath hive foundations like black veins. Caverns the size of manufacturum districts contained ammunition depots, brood chambers, and reclamation reservoirs. Entire production lines operated beneath the registered industrial levels, their labor forces marked by the genetic taint of the cult. The invaders had not merely prepared tunnels, they had raised a civilization. Hololithic layers unfolded above the strategium table within Generator Bastion 9. Each new survey pulse exposed another depth. Brood warrens glowed beneath the habitation stacks. Infected manufacturums extended far beyond their declared foundations. Subterranean rails joined the hive cities to fortress complexes hundreds of kilometers away. Heat signatures filled the network. Hundreds of millions. Some were human, others were not. Lord General Hector Vane stared at the display through his augmetic eye. The surviving command staff stood around him, pale beneath the lumen strips. Several officers had blood dried beneath their noses from the pressure of the shadow in the warp. "This cannot have been built without detection," Vane said. "It was detected," Codicier Sered answered. "Your officials chose not to understand what they saw." Colonel Dravers Cord leaned over the projection. His uniform had been replaced since the destruction of the Valley of Saint Orphiel, but soot remained embedded in his skin. A medici brace enclosed his damaged leg. Some of these routes passed directly beneath the capital defense line. "All of them do," Voros said. He stood motionless at the head of the strategium. Black ceramite reflected the diseased red light of the subterranean map. The Broodlord's skull hung from Tamas's armor at his right, its flensed bone cracked by the grenade blast that had killed it. Vane turned upon the captain. "Then the command hives require your warriors. Every surviving Astartes should reinforce the surface approaches." "The surface approaches are a distraction. Billions are fighting there. Then the distraction is functioning." Vane's hand closed around the edge of the strategium. "Pale Moor has breached 6 defense continents. The western manufactorums are gone. The outer command hives are receiving reports of organisms emerging inside secured districts. I will not permit you to abandon the capital. Voros enlarged the deepest point of the subterranean network. At its center, every major transit line converged upon a chamber beneath Hive Ossuar. The cult maintains a central brood nexus. Destroy it, and the underground network fractures. Leave it intact, and every tunnel beneath Vardos opens to the Tyranids. You do not know that. The pattern is obvious. I command this war. You command the delay. Silence spread through the strategium. Vane's jaw tightened. And what do you command? The killing blow. Voros transmitted deployment orders. Assault squads, Blade Guard veterans, and 3rd Company kill teams received coordinates. Tech Marine Vask began plotting routes through the ancient corpse-rendering shafts beneath the hive. Cord watched the force allocation appear. You are taking the warriors holding the capital's eastern wall. The wall will remain manned. By my soldiers. Yes. The ground beneath them may collapse. Yes. Cord stared at the Mortifactor. You regard men as meat. Voros's bone-colored helm turned towards him. Meat feeds a purpose, Colonel. Soldiers who obey can do the same. And those who disobey? Waste. The Mortifactors descended through the corpse shafts. Before the Tyranids came, the industrial lifts had carried the dead from Hive Ossua's habitation levels into the rendering districts. The shafts were wide enough for cargo platforms and deep enough that falling bodies required minutes to reach the processing floors. The mechanisms had failed. The Astartes went down upon chains. Black-armored figures descended into absolute darkness. Boots braced against walls glazed by generations of human fat. Assault marines lowered themselves beside Blade Guard, carrying storm shields and master-crafted power swords. Their armor bore old cuts and fresh acid burns. Trophy chains scraped the shaft walls with whispers of bone against metal. Far beneath them, corpse mountains waited. They rose from the processing galleries in pale slopes. Human skeletons had been crushed, sorted and stacked by machines that no longer functioned. Skulls lay in drifts around clogged grinders. Long bones filled extraction troughs. Teeth had gathered in rusted filtration baskets like heaps of ivory seeds. Tanks of corpse starch lined the galleries. The nutrient paste within had darkened to grey. Human grease floated across its surface. Several vats had ruptured, flooding the floor with a thick slurry in which fragments of fingers and jaws remained visible. Caroly stepped into it without hesitation. The paste reached his greaves. The Imperium condemns our rights, he said, yet it grinds its dead into rations and feeds them to the living. Veteran Sergeant Halleck raised his shield as something moved beyond the vats. The distinction concerns necessity. Caroly's skull helm turned towards him. Necessity is the only honest sacrament. The squads moved deeper. No lumen functioned below the processing galleries. Spores hung within the air in clouds dense enough to defeat thermal imaging and distort Auspex returns. They adhered to armor lenses, crawled into damaged vents, and grew pale tendrils where they found moisture. Voros ordered the lamps extinguished. Darkness closed over the Mortifactors. Their ancestors had hunted in such night. On Posel, warriors had learned to read the displacement of air before a blade moved. They smelled fear upon the skin. They felt footfalls through soil and recognized tribes by the cadence of breath. The chapter remembered what the world had taught it. Squads advanced without Vox communication. Warriors touched gauntlets to armor in coded patterns. Brief Auspex pulses traveled through the tunnels, each lasting less than a heartbeat before darkness returned. Tamas moved near the rear of Voros's formation. He wore his first helmet now. The Broodlord's bone had been fixed across the faceplate, its remaining eye socket surrounding his right lens. The injury in his abdomen burned with every step, though Farkas had sealed the wound and declared him fit to kill. He smelled the enemy before the Auspex found it. A sweet odor of spoiled meat entered through his armor filters. Tamas raised one hand. The Mortifactors stopped. Nothing moved. A sound came from above, not a footfall, a drop of liquid striking ceramite. A battle brother disappeared. One moment his identification rune stood within the formation. The next it rose rapidly into the darkness. His armor struck a ventilation grill hard enough to bend it inward. Claws opened his throat before his bolter fired. Blood fell upon the warriors below. The corpse followed. Its head hung by a strip of flesh. The throat had been torn open between helmet and gorget. Both hands still gripped the bolter. The lictor was gone. The Mortifactors continued. The second attack came at a junction of maintenance tunnels. A long-limbed shape emerged from the wall itself, camouflage skin abandoning the pattern of rusted metal as it moved. Its talons entered a blade guard veteran beneath the arm. The warrior turned, trapping the limb between his body and shield. A second claw punched through his helmet lens. The point emerged from the back of his skull, carrying an eye and a clot of brain matter. His power sword ignited as his body fell. The blade cut a trench through the floor. Bolters fired. The lictor vanished into a ventilation cavity before the round struck. Explosions tore meat and metal from the wall, but the creature had already retreated. Voros halted the advance. Darkness absolute, he voxed. Every remaining display dimmed. Even armor runes disappeared. The Mortifactors took positions along the tunnel and ceased moving. 11 minutes passed. Mortals would have shifted their weight, coughed or whispered prayers. The Astartes became statues. Their twin hearts slowed. Breath moved through their lungs with almost no sound. The lictors returned. One descended behind Carolee. A second crawled along the ceiling above the blade guard. The third came through the corpse-starch drainage channel beneath Tamas. Voros waited until all three committed. Now! Prometheum fire filled the dark. Flamers roared from concealed positions. Burning gel struck the lictors and clung to their changing skin. Camouflage failed beneath the flame. Tall shapes thrashed against the walls, outlined in orange fire. Plasma followed. Blue bolts burned through thoraxes and vaporized limbs. Disciplined bolter bursts struck joints and skulls. One lictor reached the blade guard line despite the fire, its flesh burning away from the ribs. Halleck met it with his storm shield. The impact drove him backwards. Its talons scraped across the shield's energy field. Halleck thrust his power sword beneath its jaw and fired the blade upward through the skull. The lictor convulsed. Halleck ripped the sword free. Brain matter steamed upon the blade. Tamas killed the creature beneath him with his combat knife. He drove the weapon into the damaged seam behind its skull and used both hands to wrench sideways. Vertebrae separated. The lictor's head folded against its shoulder. Carolee watched it die. The night belongs to those who remain still within it. They found the synaptic organ beyond the hunting tunnels. It pulsed inside the torso of a Terranid warrior fused to the wall. The creature's limbs had withered. Veins extended from its spine into the surrounding structure, carrying psychic impulses through living cables grown along the transit network. Serid approached it alone. "Destroy it," Voros said. "Not yet." The librarian removed one gauntlet. The air around him thickened beneath psychic pressure. Blood began running from the nostrils of the nearest warriors. Frost formed upon armor despite the heat. Serid placed his bare hand against the exposed organ. The hive mind opened beneath him. It possessed no voice, yet intention entered his thoughts in a flood. He saw Vardos from orbit, not as a world of cities or men, but as an arrangement of nutrients. Human bodies were protein reserves. Prometheum oceans were volatile compounds. Ammunition stockpiles were concentrations of metals and reactive chemicals. The manufactorums contained rare elements gathered from 1,000 tithed worlds. Pale Moor did not seek to preserve any of it. It sought density. The surface attacks drove defenders inward. Every retreat concentrated soldiers, refugees, vehicles and supplies within fewer strongholds. The cult's underground army would open beneath those positions when the accumulation reached its greatest value. Vardos was being herded. Sered tore his hand away. Skin remained stuck to the organ. Blood ran across his palm. "It does not intend conquest," he said. Voros watched him. "It intends harvest. Every surface assault forces the population towards the command hives. When the strongholds are full, the tunnels open. Soldiers, civilians, munitions, fuel and industrial stockpiles will be consumed together." "Efficient," Karoli said. Sered looked at him. The Reclusiarch displayed no disgust, only recognition. Voros destroyed the organ with a bolt round. The thing burst against the wall. Psychic recoil moved through the tunnels like distant thunder. "Then we deny the harvest." The brood nexus lay beneath a transit cathedral older than the hive above it. The chamber had been built around a forest of stone pillars and suspended rail lines. Machinery filled the walls from floor to vaulted roof. Cables descended like roots, joining an immense throne of flesh at the chamber's center. The Patriarch had grown into the mechanism. Its lower body disappeared beneath layers of tissue fused to command consoles and rail control engines. 4 arms extended from its torso. The upper pair ended in long claws. The lower limbs had merged with bundles of nerve cables that ran into the planetary transport grid. Thousands knelt before it. Administratum officials, rail overseers, defense logisticians, and manufacturing masters filled the chamber in ordered ranks. Some wore ceremonial robes, others bore military uniforms. All displayed the physical inheritance of the cult. Ridges moved beneath their brows. Additional arms pressed hands together in prayer. The Patriarch opened its eyes. Every kneeling cultist spoke with it. "The children of the star gods have come." Voros raised his bolter. No challenge followed, no demand for surrender, no offer of absolution. "Seal the exits," he ordered. Mortifactors placed charges along the chamber doors. Vask's serfs connected canisters of incendiary compound to the ventilation grid. The mixture was not true phosphex, but a Mechanicus brewed accelerant of promethium gel, rad phosphor, and reactive metallic dust. It clung to flesh and burned beneath water. The cultists began to rise. Karoli activated final benediction. "Remain kneeling," he said. "You have chosen the correct posture for death." The charges detonated. Doors collapsed inward. Incendiary gas flooded the cathedral. The mortifactors withdrew as the first flame ignited. Green-white fire crossed the chamber. Cultists burned where they knelt. Skin contracted upon skulls. Eyes boiled and burst. Additional arms struck at robes already fused to flesh.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support really helps.
Men crawled over one another while the accelerant entered mouths and continued burning inside lungs. The Patriarch screamed through every voice. Its flesh blackened upon the throne. Cables ruptured. Burning fluid sprayed from machinery. One claw struck through a pillar before the fire consumed the muscles controlling it. The mortifactors sealed the final blast door. The screams continued beyond the metal. Then, the world moved. Dormant charges awakened beneath the capital continent. The cult had embedded them along geological faults, reactor conduits, and foundation pylons. Their brood nexus had not merely controlled the underground transport system, it had restrained the trap. The first detonation broke Hive Osua's lower eastern district from its foundations. Habitation towers tilted, bridges snapped between them. Billions of tons of ferrocrete descended into the underhive, crushing entire population blocks before warning sirens sounded. The second blast opened a fault beneath the defense line. Trenches, artillery emplacements, and armored companies fell into darkness. Tanks overturned upon infantry. Ammunition depots detonated as they struck lower strata. Men were buried beneath the bodies of their own formations. The collapse spread. District after district sank into the excavated world below. Hundreds of millions died in minutes. Some were crushed between collapsing levels. Others fell for kilometers through transit voids, striking walls, machinery, and one another until the bottom filled with broken bodies. The opened wounds did not remain empty. Tyranids emerged from them. Gaunts climbed through the debris. Raveners followed. Genestealers entered surviving tunnels and struck command posts from beneath. Larger organisms forced their way upward, widening the ruptures with talons and armored skulls. Voros felt the floor tilt beneath him. Surface route compromised, Vask reported. Multiple shafts collapsed. Extraction impossible from current depth. Then Lord General Vane entered the command channel. His transmission carried gunfire. Voros, something has breached the command complex. The image fractured across the captain's retinal display. Vane stood inside the Basilica Strategium. Officers ran behind him. Vox servitors screamed from their lecterns. The wall behind the Lord General folded inward. No projectile struck it. Adamantium compressed beneath invisible force. Men standing nearby collapsed. Their helmets remained intact, but blood poured from every seam. Skulls ruptured inside unbroken skin. Faces swelled as bone fragments and brain matter displaced the flesh from within. Serd stopped breathing. The psychic presence above the world had arrived. Vane drew his power sword. What in the throne's name is that? Something enormous moved beyond the crushed wall. A long blade entered the chamber. It was not metal. It was bone grown for killing, wet with the blood of guardsmen. The command basilica shook. Gunfire intensified. Heavy bolters roared, then ceased one by one. Vane looked towards the approaching shape. His final transmission carried screaming, the crack of lass fire, and the slow, wrenching sound of adamantium doors being forced apart. Then, Pale Moor's weapon entered the strategium, and the Vox went dead. Hive Ossuar was dying from below. The Mortifactors climbed through its opened foundations, while entire districts descended around them. Transit tunnels folded beneath the weight of collapsing habstacks. Ferrocrete walls split apart and vomited dust, bodies and ruptured power conduits into the underhive. Rivers of burning promethium followed the fractures downward, illuminating the darkness with a hellish orange glare. Captain Voros reached the surface through the remains of a corpse processing tower. His power fist tore the final obstruction from the shaft. A slab of steel spun into the street and crushed 3 Genestealer hybrids beneath it. Third Company emerged behind him, climbing through smoke thick with powdered stone and human ash. The capital had become a carcass under dissection. Towers leaned against one another above avenues buried beneath rubble. Defense batteries fired from shattered roofs until gargoyles descended upon them. Chimera transports burned in stalled columns. Gaunts moved through the streets in hunting packs, dragging wounded soldiers from doorways and opening their bodies with living blades. A thunderhawk crossed the sky above the Mortifactors. It came low, engines shrieking, nose cannons firing into clouds of winged organisms. Gargoyles burst beneath the shells. Their remains struck the gunship in pieces, smearing the armor with entrails and chitin. A harpy descended through the smoke. Its scything wings passed over the Thunderhawk's fuselage. Metal peeled away. The gunship rolled, collided with a hive spire, and became a burning wound in the tower's side. Voros watched the extraction rune vanish. Airspace denied, Vask reported. Every available gunship is engaged. More than 60% have suffered damage. Distance to the command basilica, 12 kilometers. Voros looked along the avenue. The route crossed 3 collapsing districts, 2 breached defense lines, and a manufactorum quarter already registering a synaptic presence. Advance on foot. Caroli raised final benediction. The Mortifactors entered the streets. They moved in disciplined wedges through rivers of fleeing civilians and broken soldiers. Gaunts attacked from alleys. Bolter fire tore them apart before they reached the formation. Genestealers descended from walls and ceiling braces, only to meet storm shields, chain swords, and power blades. The chapter did not slow for the wounded. Men reached towards them from beneath collapsed transports. Officers shouted pleas for reinforcement. priests attempted to follow, waving relics and invoking the Emperor's angels. The Mortifactors left them behind. Above the fighting, the planetary command net fractured into 1,000 voices. Colonel Dravas Cord inherited the war because every officer senior to him had died, vanished, or ceased responding. He stood inside an auxiliary command bunker beneath the capital's Eastern Artillery District. Half the hololithic displays were dead. Vox servitors screamed corrupted coordinates. A tactical adept repeatedly struck his own head against a console until soldiers dragged him away. Cord had 6 billion troops under nominal command. He could communicate with fewer than half. 37 major breaches had opened across the capital continent. Ammunition reserves had fallen below operational projections. 3 command hives were silent. 5 others reported tyrannids inside their walls. Armored divisions had become isolated islands, fighting in oceans of alien bodies. The last image from Lord General Vane's strategium showed something tall and pale, forcing its way through adamantium blast doors. Then came screaming. Then silence. Cord opened a priority channel to Voros. The captain's image appeared through static. Corpse white armor filled the frame. Blood ran down one side of the skull helm. Cord did not salute. "Which armies do you intend to sacrifice next?" Voros fired his bolter at something beyond the picked lens. The weapon's report distorted the transmission. A wet explosion followed. "The armies nearest the enemy. That describes every army on Vardos. Then your deployment is efficient." Cord struck the command table. "I need a strategy, not contempt. You require obedience. What I require is knowledge. Vane is dead. The command basilica is lost. My officers are reporting a creature that ignores tank fire and kills men without touching them. It hunts me." Cord stared at the captain's image. "Then leave the planet." "No. Draw it away from the capital. It will follow until it is exposed. How many soldiers die while you test that certainty?" "As many as required." The channel closed. Cord stood amid the shrieking command machinery and understood that the Mortifactors had not come to save Vardos. They had come to spend it. Voros transmitted the chapter's advance across every functioning picked feed. The image appeared upon command screens, shrine projectors, manufactorum monitors, and the cracked displays of abandoned hab units. Mortifactors marched through avenues filled with bodies. Bone-colored helms turned through smoke. Trophy chains swung against black armor. Cult skulls hung from standards and vehicle aerials, their stripped teeth painted with blood. Caroli opened the public vox. His voice entered every surviving frequency. "The grave stands open." Mortifactors answered behind him. "We descend without fear. The enemy brings hunger. We bring death. The flesh fails. Bone endures." The chant rolled through Hive Ossuar. Soldiers heard it in trenches where ammunition had run dry. Tank crews heard it while tyrannids climbed across their hulls. Artillerymen heard it as they loaded their final shells. Men who had expected noble saviors saw skull-faced giants walking through the ruin, carrying severed heads and promising no mercy. They rallied because the monsters approaching from behind belonged to the Emperor. Regiments that had begun to withdraw turned back towards the swarm. Wounded officers dragged themselves upright and resumed issuing orders. Soldiers climbed onto barricades of corpses and fired into gaunts flooding the streets. The Mortifactors advanced through them like a funeral procession. The first psychic blow struck without warning. A Blade Guard veteran lifted from the ground. No claw touched him, no weapon fired. His armor folded around his body as though squeezed by an invisible fist. Ceramite plates buckled inward. Ribs broke beneath the cuirass. Blood burst from the neck seal in a pressurized stream. The crushed warrior crossed the avenue and struck a wall. His body remained embedded in the stone. Serid staggered. "It is here." The second blow traveled along the street. Windows exploded. Statues broke apart. A squad of Vardosian infantry collapsed together. their skulls rupturing inside intact helmets. Blood, teeth, and brain matter poured through visor slits. Voros raised his bolter. Visual contact! The Norn emissary emerged through the smoke. It stood taller than a dreadnought, yet it moved with the speed of a striking serpent. Pale armor covered a body grown for assassination rather than siege. Long limbs ended in blades capable of cutting battle plate. Cerebral symbiotes pulsed beneath its cranial crest, each organ glowing with restrained psychic force, its eyes fixed upon Voros. Nothing else mattered to it. A Land Raider Redeemer turned into the avenue, its flamestorm cannons fired. Promethium engulfed the emissary. The creature crossed through the flame without breaking stride. Its carapace blackened. Tissue beneath it remained intact. The Land Raider's Lascannons struck next. One beam burned across the creature's shoulder. The second missed as it moved aside with impossible grace. The emissary reached the tank. Its upper blades entered beneath the front armor and cut through the hull. Metal screamed. The creature pulled. The Land Raider opened from prow to troop compartment. Crew and passengers spilled into the street with ruptured bodies and burning uniforms. The emissary tore through the wreckage, flinging Terminators aside as it searched for Voros. Sergeant Bors stepped between them. His tactical dreadnought armor had been repaired with mismatched plates taken from fallen brothers. Fresh purity seals covered the damage suffered inside the Synapse ship. A thunder hammer rested upon one shoulder. "Captain," he voxed privately. "Exchange command identifications." Voros understood immediately. The emissary did not recognize his face. It followed armor runes, psychic scent, and inherited impressions transmitted through pale maw. "You will die," Voros said, "then make the expenditure useful." Voros changed the identification codes. His command rune vanished from the tactical network and reappeared upon Bors. The sergeant became Captain Malak Voros in every transmission, targeting return and psychic. Spore the Mortifactors could manipulate. Bors struck his breastplate. "First Company, upon me." Terminators emerged from side streets and ruined structures. Their armor carried thunder hammers, chain fists, storm shields, and cyclone missile launchers. Teleport homers ignited across their belts. Bors turned towards the emissary. "Come and take the head you were grown to seek." The creature looked at him. Voros ceased to exist within its attention. Bors withdrew towards the Manufactorum district. The emissary followed. Voros watched the First Company veterans move away. Carolee stood beside him. "You condemn them without sorrow. Sorrow does not improve the trap." The Manufactorum quarter had been prepared while the Mortifactors fought below the hive. Techmarine Vask had seeded its foundation levels with gravitic mines taken from orbital boarding stores. Extraction furnaces had been overloaded. Smelting pits burned beneath fractured floors. Transit bridges had been weakened with melter charges. Bors entered the district through a gate formed from the ribs of an industrial cathedral. The emissary came behind him. "Seal the approach," he ordered. The Terminators teleported. Lightning split the Manufactorum gloom. First Company warriors materialized around the creature in a circle of blue-white fire. Cyclone missiles launched from their shoulders. Warheads struck the emissary's flanks, rupturing armor and throwing black blood across machinery. Thunder hammers descended before the smoke cleared. Power fields detonated against alien bone. One hammer shattered a lower limb. The emissary fell, then twisted in mid-motion. A blade entered the Terminator who had struck it. The point passed through breastplate, fused ribs and both hearts before emerging from the warrior's back. The creature lifted him from the floor. Its second blade opened the armor from groin to throat. The Terminator came apart inside his plate. Organs and blood fell between the separated halves while the emissary discarded him. Chain fists bit into its shoulder. Adamantium teeth cut through carapace and ruptured two cerebral symbiotes. Psychic force burst from the wounds. Nearby machinery folded inward. A Terminator was hurled against a furnace, housing hard enough to crack his armor from spine to breastplate. He tried to rise. The emissary looked at him. His helmet collapsed. Bone and brain matter sprayed from the gorget as the invisible pressure crushed his head into the chest cavity. Bors struck the creature's knee with his thunderhammer. The joint exploded. Splinters of bone passed through the abdomen. The emissary lashed out, cutting through Bors' left pauldron and severing the arm beneath it. The limb fell with the thunderhammer still locked in its fist. Bors remained standing. He fired his wrist-mounted storm bolter into the creature's face. Shells detonated across the cranial crest. One eye burst. A cerebral sac ruptured and spilled translucent fluid down the emissary's jaw. Now Vask. Gravitic mines awakened beneath the district. The first detonation changed the direction of gravity around the emissary. Its body struck the floor with enough force to crater metal. Terminators mag-locked themselves to the foundations, while further mines activated. Walls bent. Support columns tore free. Entire manufactorum towers leaned towards the central pit as gravity dragged them inward. Furnaces split open. Rivers of molten metal poured across the floors. The emissary roared without sound. Psychic force rippled from it, holding collapsing machinery away for several heartbeats. Then, the melter charges detonated. The district fell. Towers, assembly lines, cranes, and thousands of tons of molten industrial waste descended into the opened foundations. The emissary disappeared beneath them. First Company runes vanished one by one. The ground shook across Hive Ossuar. Voros waited. One identification signal returned. Bors crawled from the wreckage 3 minutes later. He possessed one arm. Half his face had been torn away with his helmet. The left side of his jaw hung exposed, teeth visible through burned muscle. Molten metal had fused armor plates across his back. Apothecary Farkas approached him. Bors pushed the Narthesium aside. Did it die? Serid looked into the psychic storm above the ruins. No. Bors struck the ground with his remaining fist. He did not. Curse Voros for using him as bait. He cursed because the bait had failed. Caroly knelt among the manufactorum dead. He removed his skull helm and slowed both hearts. Smoke moved around his scarred face. Gunfire faded from his awareness. The Reclusiarch descended towards the silence where the chapter believed its honored dead waited. A skull appeared before him. It bore the ritual markings of Sasebo Tezuka, founder of the Mortifactors. The lower jaw was absent. Cracks ran through the brow. Empty sockets regarded Caroly from within the dark. The skull spoke without a mouth. Make the world a blade. Caroly saw Vardos turn beneath him. Its promethium reservoirs became veins of fire. Reactors burned like hearts. Orbital debris circled the planet as fragments of sharpened iron. Pointed upward, the skull said. Serid entered the trance beside him. He saw the same skull. Tendrils moved within its empty sockets. They emerged slowly, wet and pale, curling around the ancestral bone. Tyrannid mouths opened where ritual carvings should have been. Serid broke from the vision. Caroly opened his eyes. The founder has spoken. The hive mind wore his face. Faces are vessels. Truth survives the flesh that bears it. Voros looked towards the burning sky. The remaining Prometheum oceans lay beneath the equatorial manufactorum belt. Hundreds of plasma reactors powered the foundries. Orbital weapon platforms still possessed ammunition. The broken ring continued to circle Vardos in vast, unstable fragments. The planet could not be defended. It could be weaponized. Voros opened the strategic hololith. He plotted the surviving reactors, fuel reserves, munitions vaults, and orbital wreckage. Lines converged above the equator. Serid saw the design first. You would kill the world. The world is already dead. Palemore has not committed its largest vessels. It will when the biomass is concentrated. Caroly replaced his helm. The grave must be fed. Until the grave is poisoned, Voros said. He opened the command channel to Cord. The colonel appeared beneath failing lumen strips. Blood covered one side of his face. Behind him, officers shouted over broken Vox equipment. New operational directive. Voros said. "Withdraw every surviving formation towards the equatorial manufacturum belt. Armored armies, artillery reserves, refugee columns and supply convoys, everything capable of movement." Cord stared at the projected orders. "That will abandon the northern hives." "Yes." "It will bring the entire swarm after us." "Yes." The colonel understood. His expression hardened into something beyond anger. "How many evacuation vessels will be provided?" Voros watched burning fragments of the orbital ring cross the poisoned heavens. "There will be no evacuation." The withdrawal consumed continents. Billions abandoned the fortifications they had raised with their own blood. Trench lines that had resisted for weeks emptied in hours. Infantry regiments climbed from firing bays and joined the roads south, carrying rifles, wounded comrades, ammunition crates, and regimental standards burned black by atmospheric fire. Armored columns crawled beside them, their engines coughing soot into skies already poisoned by promethium smoke. Every road leading towards the equatorial manufacturum belt became a river of flesh and steel. Lehman Russ tanks forced paths through refugee columns with their dozer blades. Chimera transports carried twice their intended complement, soldiers clinging to hulls, exhaust housings and track guards until sudden turns threw them beneath the treads. Artillery tractors dragged guns through crowds too dense to part. Servitors marched until overheated joints locked and following vehicles crushed them into the roadway. The wounded came in millions. Men without legs were strapped across ammunition limbers. Those who could still stand used rifles as crutches. Field medici teams abandoned triage protocols and marked the dying with black paint so transport crews would not waste space upon them. Behind the columns, Vardos burned. Tyranids descended from the skies upon the moving armies. Gargoyles swept across the roads in shrieking clouds, their flesh borers spitting living rounds into packed ranks. Beetle-like ammunition entered mouths, eyes and throats, burrowing through flesh before bursting outward in sprays of bone. Harpies came lower. Their weapons seeded the columns with clusters of living mines. The organisms struck among soldiers and unfolded on clawed limbs, swelling before detonation. Bodies vanished in wet blossoms. Tanks disappeared beneath clouds of acidic vapor. Men survived without skin, stumbling through the retreat with exposed muscle shining red beneath the chemical rain. The earth opened beneath them. Raveners erupted through highways, overturning transports and artillery pieces. Trigons split whole marching formations, their armored heads rising beneath men packed too tightly to flee. One emerged beneath a super-heavy fuel convoy and opened the ground from end to end. Promethium tankers rolled into the rupture. The explosion traveled for kilometers. The road became a furnace. Soldiers ignited where they stood. Those nearest the blast turned to shadows burned into armor plate. Those farther away ran with uniforms aflame until their lungs filled with heat and failed. Still, the withdrawal continued. The Mortifactors moved among it without haste. Thunderhawks made brief descents to collect ammunition, gene seed and wounded battle brothers, judged capable of returning to combat. No mortal soldiers were permitted aboard. Men reached for the lowering assault ramps and were struck aside by chapter serfs or crushed beneath armored boots. Captain Voros watched the retreat from the command deck of a repulsor executioner. Hololithic runes marked the roads, the pursuing organisms, and the diminishing time before the equatorial gates would have to close. Entire armies had ceased reporting. Others existed only as clusters of locator signals, moving south without officers or orders. Apothecary Farkas entered the channel. Contamination confirmed. His transmission originated at Gate Sepulchre, the northern entrance to the equatorial defense zone. Refugee columns filled the approaches for more than 40 kilometers. Voros turned the tactical display towards the gate. Extent. Widespread. Genetic indicators appear among civilians and military personnel. Some possess no visible mutation. Others conceal secondary limbs beneath garments or armor.
Blood samples suggest the infection has passed through several generations. Can the tainted be isolated? Not before they enter the fortress. How many? Uncertain. Hundreds of thousands confirmed, potentially millions. Voros enlarged the view. Refugees pressed against the outer barriers. Soldiers fired into the air to force them back. Children were held above the crowd so they would not be crushed. Wounded men crawled beneath transports. Priests shouted prayers from the roofs of burned vehicles. Beyond them, tyrannid vanguard organisms were closing. "Seal the gate," Voros said. Farkas did not question the order. Gate sepulchre sealing. The fortress doors began to close. They were slabs of adamantium large enough to divide districts. Hydraulic engines groaned beneath the strain. The crowd saw them moving and surged forward. Men were crushed against the narrowing gap. Bodies compressed between armor plates until ribs and skulls failed. Blood spread across the threshold. Soldiers inside the gate fired warning shots, then aimed into the mass when the pressure threatened to overwhelm the mechanisms. Voros transmitted coordinates to the artillery command. Colonel Cord received them in silence. He stood within the equatorial strategium, surrounded by exhausted officers. The chamber had once overseen shell production for the surrounding manufactorums. Now its walls carried tactical projections, casualty counts, and orbital trajectories. Servitors bearing industrial cogitators had been chained into command thrones. Cord studied the targeting grid. The coordinates covered every road beyond Gate Sepulchre. "No," he said. His second in command, Brigadier Hahn, looked at him. "Colonel," Cord opened a channel to Voros. "Those roads contain loyal regiments. They contain infected hosts. They contain civilians. They contain a breach. My artillery will not fire." Voros's reply was immediate. "Then another officer will command it." Cord leaned over the console. "You have burned armies alive. You have buried soldiers beneath mountains. You have abandoned whole hives. This ends here." The strategium doors opened. Voros entered with 4 mortifactors. He had
traveled from the outer defense line without announcing his approach. Blood stained his greaves. A severed genestealer claw hung from his belt beside spent magazines. Cord turned to face him. Brigadier Hahn reached for his las pistol. Voros fired once. The bolt struck Hahn beneath the collarbone. It penetrated the breastplate and detonated inside his chest. His torso opened from spine to sternum. Both arms spun away. Heart, lungs, and fragments of rib struck the command screens behind him. The remains fell at Cord's feet. Every weapon in the chamber came up. Mortifactors raised bolters in answer. Voros looked only at Cord. "Give the order." Cord's face had gone pale beneath the soot. "You would kill every officer here. I would kill every officer on Vardos if obedience required it. They are Imperial citizens. They are compromised biomass approaching the final defensive zone. Some are untainted. Yes." The simplicity of the answer silenced the room. Voros stepped closer. "You may obey and retain command, or you may die, and the artillery will fire under an officer less troubled by the arithmetic of survival." Cord looked down at Hahn's body. The brigadier's blood had reached his boots. "How many loyal subjects will die?" "Enough." Cord closed his eyes. Then he opened the artillery channel. "All batteries," he said. His voice cracked once before discipline restored it. "Execute fire plan Sepulchre. Full saturation. No delay." The guns answered. Basilisks fired from emplacements spread across the equatorial belt. Their barrels recoiled beneath thunderous discharges. Earthshaker shells climbed through the smoke and descended upon the refugee roads. The first impacts struck the rear of the columns. Men, vehicles, and tyrannids vanished inside towers of earth. Further shells walked forward in ordered sequence. Crowds broke apart under the bombardment. Bodies rose into the air in pieces. Arms, legs, and sections of torso struck fleeing survivors. Manticores launched. Their rockets separated above the roads and fell across the massed refugees. Fire consumed infantry formations, still carrying regimental colors. Chimera hulls opened like metal coffins. Tank crews burned inside vehicles trapped by the crowd. Mortar batteries joined the barrage. Defensive lasers swept the highway approaches. Their beams cut through people by the hundreds, leaving rows of torsos sliding from severed legs. One discharge passed through an infected convoy and continued into the Tyranids behind it, opening smoking tunnels through both species. The gate remained closed. Those who reached it died against the adamantium. Soldiers hammered rifle stocks against the metal. Civilians tore bloody fingernails trying to climb its surface. A priest stood upon a wrecked transport and held an aquila above the crowd until an artillery shell removed the upper half of his body. The bombardment continued until the roads ceased moving. Kilometers of highway disappeared beneath corpses and cratered vehicles. Human bodies lay so densely that the pursuing gaunts were forced to climb over them. Boots sank through ruptured chests. Talons slipped upon exposed intestines. Tyranid advance formations slowed as they crossed the dead. Voros watched the delay appear on the tactical display. 14 minutes purchased, he said. Cord stared at him with murder in his eyes. 14 minutes. Use them. The first mutiny began before the guns cooled. 3 Vardosian divisions turned upon their command posts after receiving picked feed from Gate Sepulchre. Soldiers shot their commissars, killed artillery officers, and opened firing ports towards the Mortifactors, guarding the inner roads. Their broadcasts spread through the retreating armies. Angels of death are butchers. They sacrifice loyal men. They will burn us all. Other formations joined them. Lasfire struck mortificator positions along the manufactorum perimeter. Heavy weapons targeted chapter transports. One autocannon burst, tore through a squad of serfs unloading ammunition, and reduced them to scattered limbs. Caroli led the response. He entered the mutineers' headquarters through the western gate, while its defenders still shouted demands over the Vox. Final benediction ignited in his hands. A platoon fired upon him. Lasbolts scorched his armor. One struck the skull helms, cheek, and burned through the outer bone plating. Caroli continued walking. Mortifactors advanced behind him. Their bolters fired in disciplined pairs. Men burst apart inside the barricades. A soldier lost his head and remained standing for several seconds, blood pumping from the neck before another body struck him down. Heavy bolter rounds ripped through firing slits and detonated inside packed chambers, reducing defenders to meet against the rear walls. Caroli reached the command bunker. A lieutenant stood upon the roof with a power sword raised. "Traitors!" the officer shouted. "Murderers!" Caroli ascended through the gunfire. The lieutenant swung. Final benediction cut through sword, hands and throat in a single stroke. The man's head turned as it fell, eyes still fixed upon the reclusiarch. Caroli opened the mutineers' Vox network. "You are not traitors," he said. The shooting faltered. "You are frightened men who mistook terror for conscience. Your courage failed before your duty did." Mortifactors breached the bunker beneath him. Screams rose from within. "You will now serve the purpose your courage could not." Caroli ordered every surviving mutineer driven into the outer trench line. Those who refused were executed. Those who obeyed received ammunition and positions facing the Tyranids. None were promised pardon. Cruelty became logistics. Fuel dumps behind the withdrawing armies were destroyed, denying any vehicle the option of turning back. Drivers who slowed were shot by mounted commissars or rammed forward by tanks behind them. Bridges were demolished when Tyranids reached the approaches, regardless of how many Imperial soldiers remained upon the spans. Men fell with the rubble into industrial chasms. Some survived the impact and called upward until raveners found them in the dark. Medici stations were stripped of transports. Wounded men watched ammunition crates and reactor components loaded into vehicles assigned for their evacuation. Orderlies abandoned operating theaters with patients still restrained to tables. Surgeons left bodies open beneath surgical lamps when guards ordered them onto the final convoys.
The wounded remained behind. Some asked for pistols, others were given grenades and told to wait until the Tyranids entered the wards. Tamas received command of the surviving Faceless at the mouth of Transit Shaft Morning. 23 neophytes remained. Their unhelmed faces watched him with the same expectation he had once carried before earning the Broodlord's skull. They wanted recognition. They expected him to remember the darkness, the silence and the indifference of the blooded. They expected suffering to make him merciful. Tamas looked into the shaft. Ospec's returns showed movement beneath the retreat route. The tunnel would collapse once the demolition charges were armed. Someone had to enter, identify the synaptic organisms, and place the charges by hand. He selected 6 neophytes. "You descend." One stepped forward. Blood covered his shaved scalp. Probability of extraction? None. The neophyte held his gaze. Tamas remembered Vardus cutting the name runes from his throat. He remembered the Broodlord's claw passing through his abdomen. He remembered the dying scout he had executed after his blooding. "Your task is not extraction," Tamas said. "Your task is collapse." The 6 Faceless entered the tunnel. No farewell was spoken. Tamas watched their locator runes descend. 3 vanished beneath enemy contact. The others reached the charge points. The detonation collapsed the shaft and buried a brood of Tyranid warriors beneath millions of tons of ferrocrete. None of the 6 returned. The remaining neophytes looked at Tamas differently, not with brotherhood, with understanding. The shadow in the warp deepened as pale maw closed around Vardos. Sered fell to his knees inside the reactor sanctum. Visions tore through him. He saw the Hall of Victors filled with Mortifactors, kneeling around the bodies of their own dead. Karoli cut flesh from fallen brothers and passed it among the chapter. Warriors ate the hearts of those whose gene seed had already been removed. Blood-filled chalices made from Astartes' skulls. Tyranid mouths opened across the Reclusiarch's armor. They spoke Karoli's prayers. Blood remembers. 1 billion alien jaws answered. Bone endures. Sered rose with psychic fire gathering around his fists. Karoli stood before him. "You carry its voice," Sered said. The Reclusiarch lowered final benediction. "So do you. The visions come through you. They come through all wounds." Sered struck. Psychic force crossed the sanctum. Karoli lifted from the floor and hit a reactor pillar hard enough to crack its stone casing. Mortifactors raised weapons. Voros stepped between them. Sered's eyes burned black. Blood ran from both ears. "He is a conduit. He remains useful," Voros said. Karoli rose, armor grinding. "The librarian has mistaken fear for revelation." Voros looked from one to the other. "You will both continue serving until the enemy kills you, or I do." Sered's psychic fire faded. Karoli recovered his scythe. Neither offered submission. Neither required it. The surviving armies reached the equatorial manufactorum belt. They transformed it into a ring of guns encircling Vardos. Artillery batteries occupied production yards. Tanks formed walls across assembly districts. Infantry filled trenches cut through slag fields and worker habs. Reactor cores were rigged for overload beneath shrines, where priests recited final benedictions. Prometheum pipelines were rerouted into defensive channels. Detonation valves connected entire districts into a single chain of fire. Orbital batteries altered their targeting arrays, turning weapons once aimed at the stars towards the surface below. Vardos had become the blade Karoli had seen. Voros stood upon the wall of Manufactorum Primus as the Tyranid front appeared through the smoke. The ground began to shake. At first, soldiers mistook it for artillery. Then the shapes rose. Hierophants strode behind the swarm, their bodies towering above fortifications. Each step crushed gaunts, tanks and buildings alike. Biocannons pulsed beneath their armored thoraxes. The first weapon discharged. A stream of corrosive matter crossed the battlefield and struck an armored regiment. Tanks dissolved inside their own formations. Ceramite ran like wax. crews became red silhouettes visible through thinning hulls before collapsing into bubbling pools. Lesser Tyranids swarmed beneath the Bio-Titan's legs in numbers that blackened the plains. The Hierophants advanced. From beyond the equatorial factories came the answer. A horn sounded through the poisoned air. It was too deep for any mortal engine. A second answered, then a third. Factory walls trembled. Soldiers looked towards the horizon as immense silhouettes moved behind the smoke. The god engines of an Imperial Titan Legio were walking to war. The Feast of Titans. The god engines emerged from the ash. First came the warhounds, lean and predatory, their armored heads sweeping above the Manufactorum ruins. They moved with the restless gait of hunting beasts, plasma blast guns glowing along one flank and paired turbo lasers tracking the horizon from the other. Blackened banners streamed from their carapaces, each bearing the cog-toothed heraldry of the Collegia Titanica beneath layers of soot and dried blood. Reavers followed. They strode from fortress vaults, buried beneath the equatorial foundries, their passage tearing blast doors from hinges large enough to admit void ships. Missile racks rose upon their hunched backs. Gatling blasters rotated beneath armored fists. Volcano cannon barrels elevated towards the advancing Hierophants. Then the warlords came. Their crowns rose above the smoke like cathedral spires. Shrines, gun decks, and void shield projectors covered their immense frames. Servo skulls circled their command bastions. Priests of the machine god stood upon external galleries, chanting Binharic litanies, while censers scattered sacred oils into the polluted wind. The lead engine bore the name Imperator Vindex across its breastplate. Its war horn sounded. The note rolled across Vardos like the voice of a dying world. Infantry were hurled from their feet. Trench walls collapsed. Loose bodies slid into shell craters. Windows burst across manufactorums kilometers away. The Hierophants answered with shrieks that rattled teeth inside helmets. Around the Titans moved the lesser engines of the Imperium. Questoris knights advanced beneath ion shields, thermal cannons glowing and Reaper chainswords held low. Bane blades, shadow swords, and stormlords rolled between their legs. Millions of infantry marched in there.
Shadow, reduced by scale to insects carrying laser guns beneath the feet of walking gods. Captain Voros watched from the ruins of Manufactorum Primus. The Legio advances, Techmarine Vask reported. His voice came layered in Binharic harmonics. Tactical runes moved across Voros's helm display, marking Titan trajectories, projected kill zones, and the spreading Tyranid front. "Tell them to break the center," Voros said. Vask transmitted the request. A reply arrived from the Princeps Signoris of Imperator Vindex. "Mortifactor, this engine does not receive battlefield commands from your kind." Voros studied the nearest Hierophant. Its armored body towered above the gaunt swarms. Biocannons hung beneath its thorax, their feeding tubes pulsing with corrosive fluids. With each step, the creature crushed hundreds of its own kind. "You may break the center," Voros said, "or die with your weapons pointed somewhere less useful." A pause followed. Then Imperator Vindex altered course. The Titan battle began. The warlord's volcano cannon fired. The discharge turned the surrounding air white. A column of incandescent force crossed the battlefield and struck the lead Hierophant beneath its cranial crest. Armor plates vaporized. The creature's head disappeared within a sphere of expanding plasma. It continued walking. Black blood poured from the molten ruin. Lesser organisms climbed its limbs, feeding regenerative tissue into the wound. Imperator Vindex fired again. The second blast entered the exposed skull and traveled through the beast's body. The Hierophant convulsed. Its forelimbs collapsed, driving the headless mass into the earth. Millions of gaunts vanished beneath it. Reavers added their guns. Apocalypse missiles descended upon the swarm in burning waves. Gatling blasters cut through Bio-Titan legs. Melter cannon fire burned cavities through armor thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Warhounds ran ahead of the larger engines, circling their prey. Turbo lasers struck with surgical precision. Plasma blast guns erased Tyranid broods in sun-bright detonations. Pale Moor answered. A Hierophant raised its biocannons. Acid crossed the battlefield in a continuous stream. The first impact struck Imperator Vindex across the chest. Void shields flared blue, holding for an instant before one layer failed. Then another. The corrosive torrent spread across the Warlord's protective fields. Shield generators screamed within the Titan. Servitors burned upon their thrones. The Princeps Senioris ordered power diverted from motive systems to the remaining voids. A second Hierophant fired upon a Reaver. The acid penetrated the first shield layer and splashed across its carapace. Armor hissed. Banners vanished. Weapon housings dissolved beneath bubbling streams. The Reaver fired through the damage. Its volcano cannon severed one of the beast's forelimbs. The Hierophant stumbled, then launched itself forward. No creature of such mass should have been capable of leaping. It crossed the distance in a single convulsive bound. The Hierophant struck the Reaver's torso. Its remaining limbs punched through armor. One entered the command compartment. Princeps, Moderati, and Sensori were torn from their cradles as the claw raked through the head. Bodies and neural cables spilled from the wound. The Reaver remained standing. Its mind was dead, but motive impulses still traveled through the limbs. The God Engine took 3 blind steps, while the Hierophant clung to its carapace and ripped the crew chamber apart. Then both fell. The impact flattened an entire Night Lance and buried thousands of infantry beneath collapsing armor. Voros moved beneath the battle. Mortifactors advanced between Titan footfalls, using the clash of giants to cross the Tyranid lines. The ground shook so violently that target locks failed. Dust became a permanent wall. Every step of a warlord opened craters wide enough to swallow tanks. Third Company fought within that moving apocalypse. Bolter fire struck Tyranid warriors through the joints. Synapse beasts burst beneath disciplined volleys. Assault squads leapt onto Carnifex backs and drove melter charges into armor seams before using jump packs to escape. One warhound stepped across the Mortifactor's path. Its armored foot descended towards them. "Disperse!" Voros ordered. Battle Brothers threw themselves into shell craters. The foot struck where the squad had stood. The impact crushed gaunts, ferrocrete, and abandoned vehicles into a single flattened layer. The shockwave lifted Voros from the ground and hurled him against the wreck of a chimera. He rose before the warhound completed its stride. A wounded Hierophant moved ahead. Its left forelimb dragged uselessly. Titan fire had opened the carapace along its head and shoulder. Regenerative organisms clustered inside the wounds, knitting flesh over exposed nerve tissue. Ancient Odon saw it. The dreadnought stood among the ruins of a devotional plaza. His macroplasma incinerator steamed from repeated firing. One leg actuator leaked hydraulic fluid. Possulant finger bones still hung around his sarcophagus, despite the violence. "Odon," Vask transmitted. "Maintain formation." The Ancient ignored him. The Hierophant turned, its surviving eye fixed upon the dreadnought. Odon walked forward. "You resemble the skull beasts of Karad's winter songs," he said, "but those beasts knew fear." The Hierophant opened its thoracic weapons. Odon fired every system. Macroplasma struck the creature's head. Missiles launched from his hull and burst inside the exposed wound. Stormbolters hammered regenerative organisms into pulp. The Hierophant answered with a spray of bioacid. The attack struck Odin's left side. Armor dissolved. The dreadnought's damaged leg disappeared beneath the knee. He fell, caught himself with his power fist, and continued dragging his body forward. The Hierophant raised one limb to crush him. Odin seized it. His power fist closed around a joint broader than a battle tank. Ceramite fingers drove through armor and sank into muscle. The creature pulled, dragging the dreadnought across the plaza. "Odon," Vask said. "Release and withdraw."
The ancient laughed through static. "I have withdrawn from nothing since the night of my taking." Vask understood. He opened a direct Binharic pathway into Odin's reactor controls. The dreadnought felt the intrusion. "Make it bright, machine brother." Vask removed the safeties. The plasma reactor inside Odin's sarcophagus began to overload. Warning runes filled every mortificator display. Voros looked towards the ancient. Odin tightened his grip upon the Hierophant's limb. The beast stabbed downward, talons punching through his hull and entering the sarcophagus. Blood poured from the armored coffin. Odin spoke the names of Possulan tribes: Varkesh, Morga, Solk, Karad. The reactor detonated. A sphere of blue-white fire swallowed dreadnought and limb. The Hierophant's leg vanished below the joint. Its body tilted. For several heartbeats, the Bio-Titan remained upright upon 3 limbs. Then it fell into its own swarm. The descending mass crushed gaunts, warriors, carnifexes and feeder organisms across kilometers of battlefield. Alien bodies burst beneath its thorax. Blood rose in sheets around the impact. Ancient Odin's rune disappeared. Vask made no comment. He carved the dreadnought's final transmission into the chapter archive while the battle continued. Imperator Vindex advanced through the Titan graveyard. Its void shields had fallen. Acid scored the chest and left arm. The volcano cannon remained functional. The plasma annihilator mounted upon its opposite arm burned hot enough to distort the air. A Hierophant emerged from behind the wrecked Reaver. The warlord fired. Plasma enveloped the creature's upper body. Armor plates burst. Flesh blackened. The Hierophant crossed through the blast and struck the warlord's knee. The joint buckled. Imperator Vindex dropped low enough for the beast to reach its torso. The Hierophant drove both primary limbs through the warlord's abdominal armor. One claw penetrated the plasma reactor. The Princeps Signoris had time to transmit a single command. Engine kill. Imperator Vindex fell. Its shadow passed over 3 Imperial army groups. Men looked upward as the cathedral-sized machine descended. Some ran, others knelt. Tanks reversed into infantry. Artillery crews abandoned guns and disappeared beneath the press of bodies. The warlord struck the ground. Armor, shrines, and weapons collapsed across kilometers of defensive line. Tens of millions died beneath the hull. Then the plasma reactor ruptured. The detonation was visible from orbit. Fire expanded across the manufacturum plain. Human and tyrannid bodies ceased to exist within the inner blast. Beyond it, the shockwave tore limbs from torsos and stripped flesh from bone. Tanks rolled through the air. Knights vanished beneath molten debris. Voros mag-locked his armor to the ground. The blast struck him like a fortress wall. When the light faded, the battlefield had become a crater. The Hierophant that killed Imperator Vindex lay within it. The beast still moved. Regenerative tissue spread through its wounds. Broken limbs twitched. Feeder organisms crawled into the opened body, sacrificing their matter to repair it. Karoli watched from the crater's edge. Board it. Assault marines descended upon the Bio-Titan. Jump packs carried them through smoke and falling debris. They landed upon the creature's back and drove power blades into cracked carapace. Melter weapons burned through the armor. The smell of cooked alien flesh filled the air. Karoli entered first. He lowered himself through the breach into a chamber of pumping organs and contracting muscle. The inside of the Hierophant was hotter than a furnace. Blood flowed through channels beneath the walls. Nerve impulses passed as visible flashes through translucent tissue. The wounded beast convulsed. Mortifactors were thrown against rib-like supports. One fell into an arterial conduit and disappeared beneath the pressure of black blood. Karoli advanced deeper. He cut through sphincter valves with final benediction. Muscle recoiled from the power field. Organs ruptured around him, flooding passages with digestive acid and embryonic fluid. Gestation sacs opened. Tyrannid organisms spilled into the tunnels. Some were gaunts. Others resembled eyeless serpents bearing mouths filled with hooked teeth.
They attacked while umbilical cords still connected them to the Bio-Titan. Bolters fired at point-blank range. Alien bodies detonated against the walls. Chainswords filled the organ passages with gore. Teeth caught upon ribs and dragged loops of tissue free. One Mortifactor lost his lower arm to a creature's jaws. He seized the thing by the skull, crushed it against the wall, and continued fighting with bone protruding through the severed limb. Melter teams reached the primary nerve mass. It hung beneath the creature's cranial armor, a pulsing knot of synaptic tissue protected by cerebral symbiotes. Charges were fixed around it. Caroli entered the chamber and drove final benediction into the central node. The scythe cut through membrane, nerves, and supporting cartilage. Psychic pressure burst from the wound. 3 battle brothers fell, blood pouring from their eye lenses. Caroli tore the node free. It came away in a mass of white fibers and pumping vessels, large as a mortal torso. He carried it beneath one arm like a sacrificial heart, while the Hierophant died around them. "Charges armed," a battle brother reported. "Withdraw." The Mortifactors escaped through the breach moments before the melter charges detonated. The Bio-Titan's head expanded. Carapace split outward. Psychic organs vaporized. The creature's body went still. Caroli landed upon the ash with the synaptic node still bleeding in his grasp. The Norn emissary returned through the Titan graveyard. It came between the fallen engines, carapace scarred by Boar's failed trap. One limb ended in a regrown blade. Several cerebral symbiotes remained ruptured, leaking luminous fluid. Its attention found Voros. First Company intercepted it. Only 7 Terminators remained. Sergeant Boars stood at their center. Apothecary Farkas had sealed the stump of his missing arm and replaced half his face with crude augmetic plating. His surviving hand held a chain fist. The emissary struck. Psychic force hurled 2 Terminators beneath the wreck of a knight. Their armor collapsed around them. Another raised a thunderhammer and lost both arms before the weapon descended. Boars reached the creature's flank. His chain fist bit into its carapace. The emissary turned and drove a blade through his abdomen. The point emerged between his shoulders. Boars laughed blood through his ruined mouth. "You learned the wrong name." His remaining hand carried a teleport homer. He clamped it around the creature's leg. The emissary tore him upward. Its secondary limbs seized his shoulders. The creature pulled in opposite directions. Tactical dreadnought armor split. Boars came apart at the waist. Organs and cables spilled between the halves. The emissary cast both pieces aside. Voros activated the Homer. The creature vanished within teleport lightning. It did not reappear among waiting warriors. Aboard the headtaker, the teleportarium locked upon the signal and translated the Norn emissary into an empty armory chamber. It materialized among racks of bolters, missiles, and sealed ammunition crates. Adamantium bulkheads slammed shut around it. Chapter serfs fled through the outer corridors. Servitors turned heavy weapons towards the sealed doors. Techmarine Vask transmitted containment orders from the surface. The emissary moved. Its blades cut through the first bulkhead. The armory ruptured behind it. Ammunition detonated. Fire spread through the deck. A second strike opened the chamber to the void, hurling serfs, weapons, and burning debris into space. The creature entered the engine decks. Power failed across the cruiser. The headtaker's plasma drives flickered. Its orbit began to decay. Voros watched the vessel's rune descend across his display. The Mortifactor's only surviving strike cruiser was falling towards Vardos. The Norn emissary remained alive inside it. Teleportation tore Captain Voros apart and remade him inside a dying ship. White fire filled his armor. For less than a heartbeat, he possessed no flesh, no blood, and no certainty that the machine spirits would rebuild him in the correct shape. Then mass returned with the violence of a gunshot. He materialized knee-deep in frozen blood. The corridor around him had been opened to the void and sealed again by emergency bulkheads. Chapter serfs floated against the ceiling, where atmosphere loss had carried them before gravity returned. Their bodies were rimed with ice. Eyes bulged from ruptured sockets. One corpse had struck an ammunition rack hard enough to split its skull, leaving grey matter frozen in a fan across the brass shell casings. Emergency lumens pulsed red. Voros raised his bolter. Karoli appeared beside him in a second flare. Final benediction already ignited. Serid, Tamus, Apothecary Farkas, and the surviving veterans followed. Tech Marine Vask emerged last, his red armor surrounded by snapping arcs of displaced energy. The deck shifted beneath them. The head taker was falling. A distant impact rolled through the hull. Metal shrieked. Somewhere beyond the sealed passage, something enormous moved through the ship. Tamas looked towards the sound. The beast has learned our halls. Voros stepped over the frozen dead. Then it will die among our ancestors. Vask connected a mechadendrite to the nearest command terminal. The screen remained black. He drove the metal probe deeper, piercing the casing and entering the ships. The tech marine stiffened. Static poured from his vox grill in broken Binharic phrases. Warning runes spread across the Mortifactors' helm displays. Main propulsion crippled, Vask said. Starboard plasma drive severed from command. Port drive operating below minimum thrust. Reactor containment is failing across 3 chambers. Lower armory decks are open to the void. Navigator's sanctum inaccessible. Astropathic choir extinguished. Stable orbit? Voros asked. Impossible without full engine restoration? Time. Less than 1 hour before atmospheric capture becomes irreversible. Karoli looked along the corridor. Blood marked the walls where the emissary had passed, though none of it belonged to the creature. Can the guns fire? Vask hesitated. That hesitation gave the answer weight. I can restore propulsion or weapons, he said. Not both. The machine spirit is divided. Too many primary circuits are severed. Routing power to the drives may permit emergency translation if the warp remains reachable. Serid laughed once. It was a bitter sound. The warp is not reachable. Pale Moor has drowned it. Vask turned to Voros. The alternative is to restore the dorsal lance arrays, bombardment cannon and torpedo batteries. They may fire for several salvos before the plasma reactors fail. And the engines will die. Voros did not consider the choice. Restore the guns. Vask bowed his head. The head taker will not rise again. It will not need to. The captain opened every functioning Vox channel aboard the strike cruiser. Serfs of the Mortifactors, return to your stations. The vessel's weapons will be restored. All remaining power is to be diverted towards fire control, targeting augers and ammunition feeds. Seal all compartments behind you. Ignore evacuation protocols. No mention was made of savior pods. No mention was made of escape craft. Across the ship, surviving serfs rose from hiding places. Men with burned faces dragged themselves towards loading stations. Bonded gunners climbed over bodies frozen into access ladders. Servitors were reactivated despite missing limbs and ruptured fluid lines. Those who could still pray did so while obeying. One bridge serf asked over the Vox, "Will the ship survive, Lord?" Voros answered, "The ship will serve." The channel went silent. Vask separated from the hunting party and descended towards the reactor sanctums. He carried the last functioning master override key and the burden of choosing which organs of the vessel would live long enough to kill. Voros ordered every lumen extinguished. Emergency red faded to black. The head taker became Possil. The Mortifactors moved without sight. They sealed sections behind them, isolating the emissary's probable routes. Bulkheads closed one by one. Atmosphere vented from empty decks. Pressure alarms sounded, then ceased as systems failed. The chapter hunted by vibration. Every footfall of the Norn emissary traveled through the deck plating. Its weight was immense, yet its movements were too precise for such a body. It paused before intersections. It tested sealed routes. It doubled back when kill teams formed ahead. For the first time, the creature appeared uncertain. It had been grown to hunt a captain across open battlefields, command complexes and burning cities. It understood psychic spore, armor signatures, and the patterns of military retreat. It did not understand warriors who willingly blinded themselves. Tamas touched 2 fingers to the wall. A tremor passed through the metal. 3 decks below, he whispered, moving towards the reliquary. Karoli tilted his skull helm. It seeks the dead. It seeks us, Sered said. The librarian's psychic hood crackled beneath the shadow in the warp. Sweat and blood ran from his scalp into his armor collar. Voros signaled the advance. The Mortifactors crossed a ruptured armory. Missiles lay scattered among human remains. One serf had been cut from shoulder to hip. Both halves had frozen to opposite walls. Another had been pinned beneath a fallen bolter rack, while feeder organisms no larger than fingers crawled from his open mouth. Farkas crushed the organisms beneath one boot. Sered stopped beside a smear of luminous fluid. The emissary had bled there. "Wait," he said. Voros turned. The librarian removed one gauntlet and pressed his palm into the alien blood. The psychic contact struck him like a spear. Sered's body locked, his back arched. Dark fire moved across the veins of his psychic hood. He saw the Norn emissary not as a creature, but as a knife held within an intelligence too vast for identity. The hive mind entered him through the wound. It showed him the hall of victors. Mortifactors lay within stone sarcophagi, their hearts slowed almost to death. The skulls of their ancestors watched from the walls. Voices spoke through bone. Feed the grave, make the world a blade, poison the hunger. The images were not false. That was the horror. The hive mind had not invented the chapter's visions. It had entered the places where belief already lived. It had touched ancestral rites, sharpened old cruelties, and fed meaning into instincts the Mortifactors had carried for 10,000 years. It had not taught them to sacrifice Vardos. It had merely recognized that they would. Sered tore his hand away. The alien blood smoked upon his skin. Karoli stood over him. "What did you see?" "You." The Reclusiarch did not move. "I saw your prayers inside its mind. I saw the dead speaking with alien mouths. It guided the visions from the beginning." Karoli lowered final benediction until the blade rested beside Sered's throat. Did the words prove false? They came from the Devourer. Truth does not become false when spoken by an enemy. The dead did not command us. The dead command through memory, through instinct, through every wound that survives them. Sered rose. "You mistook manipulation for revelation." Karoli's voice remained calm. "No, I recognized a weapon." The librarian's eyes darkened. "It made us murder a world. We were prepared to murder the world before it whispered." That silenced even Sered. Karoli leaned closer. "The Xenos did not create our cruelty, Witch. It merely placed a whetstone against the edge." Voros stepped between them. "Continue the hunt." Sered's psychic aura faded. Karoli lifted his scythe. Neither man withdrew his accusation. The emissary struck before the formation reached the reliquary. A veteran disappeared sideways. One moment he guarded the passage. The next, an alien blade entered through the wall, pierced his abdomen, and dragged him into darkness. Ceramite scraped against torn metal. His bolter fired twice before something snapped his spine. The body returned in pieces. The upper half struck Voros's breastplate. Blood filled the corridor. One arm still clutched the weapon. The Mortifactors fired through the wall. Bolter shells exploded in the adjoining chamber. Alien blood sprayed through the breaches, but the emissary had already moved. Psychic force followed. 2 veterans rose from the deck. Their armor folded inward. One warrior's breastplate crushed his hearts. The other's helmet compressed until skull, teeth, and brain matter erupted through the neck seal. Karoli advanced through the invisible pressure. "Open the reliquary." Tamas reached the control shrine and struck the emergency release. Ancient doors parted. The chapter's dead waited beyond them. The reliquary extended through the heart of the head taker. Skulls filled alcoves from deck to ceiling. Human skulls marked campaigns fought before entire sectors had been founded. Orc tusks hung upon chains. Tyrannid cranial plates lay beside horned demon remains, sealed behind stasis fields. 10,000 years of killing watched the Mortifactors enter. The emissary came through the ceiling. It dropped among the skulls with blades extended. Voros rolled beneath the first strike. The limb cut through the deck where he had stood. Carolee attacked from the opposite flank. Final benediction carved sparks from the creature's carapace. Tamas moved behind it. Explosive charges hung from his belt. The emissary turned too quickly. A secondary blade caught a veteran through the pelvis and lifted him into the air. The creature tore upward. Legs, spine, and lower organs separated from the torso. Blood and intestines fell across the ancestral skulls. Farkas fired his bolt pistol into a cerebral symbiote. The organ burst beneath the shell. Psychic fluid sprayed from the wound. The emissary recoiled and hurled the mangled veteran at him. Farkas caught the body against his armor and disappeared beneath it. Voros fired into the creature's chest. Bolts exploded inside exposed tissue. The emissary crossed the distance between them before he could change magazines. One blade struck his pauldron and sheared away the armor. Another opened the cuirass across his ribs. Carolee intercepted the killing thrust, his scythe locked against the bone blade. Now Tamas, the newly blooded warrior, leapt. He climbed the emissary's back, driving his combat blade into seams between armor plates. The creature twisted, trying to reach him. Tamas forced one charge beneath a pulsing symbiote, then another. The emissary struck him with the back of one limb. He crossed the reliquary and shattered an alcove filled with human skulls. Bone fragments rained around him. The charges detonated. 3 cerebral symbiotes vanished. The back of the creature's cranial crest opened in a spray of bone, membrane, and luminous brain matter. The psychic pressure faltered. Voros attacked. His power sword entered beneath the emissary's left arm. He drove the blade through muscle until it struck internal armor. Carolee swung final benediction in a 2-handed arc. The scythe cut through one primary limb. The severed blade struck the deck and continued twitching. The emissary screamed inside every mind aboard the ship. The sound burst blood vessels in mortal ears. Serfs collapsed at their stations. Zerid fell to one knee, psychic fire pouring from his eyes. The creature turned upon Carolee. Its remaining primary blade entered beneath the Reclusiarch's breastplate. It passed through his body. The point emerged from his back in a fountain of blood, armor fragments and strips of lung. Carolee did not release his scythe. The emissary lifted him. The Reclusiarch hung impaled above the reliquary floor, both hands locked around final benediction. Blood ran from his skull helm in steady streams. He drove the scythe into the creature's throat. The power blade cut through muscle and lodged beneath the jaw. The emissary pulled back. Carolee went with it, forcing the weapon deeper. "Voros," he voxed. The captain saw the exposed wound behind the Reclusiarch. Alien brain tissue pulsed beyond torn armor. Carolee's body blocked the firing line. "Complete the rite," Carolee said. Voros raised a melter weapon taken from a fallen veteran. The Reclusiarch's damaged helm turned towards him. "Feed the grave." Voros fired. The melter blast entered Carolee's back. Armor vaporized. His body opened in white flame. Spine, hearts, and lungs ceased to exist before the beam passed through him and entered the emissary's exposed skull. The creature's brain detonated. Its head expanded around a burst of incandescent pressure. Alien tissue, liquefied organs, and fragments of bone splashed across the reliquary. Carolee's upper body vanished with it. His legs fell separately, still encased in scorched black armor. The Norn emissary remained upright for 3 heartbeats. Then it collapsed among the skulls. Silence followed. Tamas pulled himself from the broken alcove. Farkas rose beneath the corpse of the veteran that had struck him. One arm hung uselessly, but his narthecium still functioned. Voros stood over Carolee's remains. Final benediction protruded from the emissary's throat. No prayer was spoken. The ship continued falling. Vask's voice entered the reliquary. "Dorsal lances restored. Bombardment cannon functional. Torpedo batteries responding. Atmospheric capture in 37 minutes. Voros looked at the dead Reclusiarch. Fire upon Pale Moor. The largest hive vessel is descending behind the vanguard. Target it. Firing solution incomplete. Complete it while firing. Vask transmitted the order to the gun decks. The head taker spoke again. Lances crossed the void. The bombardment cannon hurled shells towards the Tyranid fleet. Torpedoes launched from damaged tubes, some tumbling without guidance, others finding living targets and detonating against organic hulls. The Mortifactors decapitated the emissary, while the cruiser recoiled beneath its own guns. The skull was too large to carry whole. Tamas used a chain blade to cut through the remaining neck plates. Farkas removed sections of cranial carapace and cerebral bone, choosing pieces marked by weapon damage. He placed them within specimen caskets, normally reserved for gene seed. Black blood covered both warriors. The trophy would fill an entire shrine upon the Basilica Mortis. Voros felt no triumph. The creature's death had changed nothing beyond the ship. The shadow remained. Tyranid organisms still moved according to a single will. Pale Moor continued descending upon Vardos. Serid stood beside the broken skull. The beast was never the mind. Voros looked towards him. The librarian's face had aged during the battle. Dark veins covered his temples. One eye had clouded white. "It was a finger," Serid said. "A blade grown around one command. The true synaptic heart remains above us." The reliquary's hololith flickered to life. A vast Tyranid vessel filled the display. It dwarfed the surrounding bioships. Feeder tendrils extended from its underside. Capillary organs swelled along its flanks. The creature was entering low orbit, positioning itself above the equatorial manufacturum belt, where billions of soldiers, civilians and Tyranids had been concentrated. "The largest hive ship," Serid said. "It carries the will of Pale Moor, close enough to begin final consumption." Vask's voice came over the Vox. "The head taker's descent vector is changing under planetary gravity." A new trajectory appeared. The dying strike cruiser was falling towards Vardos. The hive ship lay directly in its path. The final war council convened aboard a vessel already condemned to die. Captain Voros stood within the shattered strategium of the head taker, while Vardos turned beneath the armored viewing ports. Fires covered the equatorial belt in a broken ring. The manufactorum districts glowed beneath clouds of ash, artillery smoke, and the burning remains of descending spores. Beyond the planet, Pale Moor gathered around its wounded synaptic heart. The primary hive ship filled half the tactical hololith. It had entered low orbit above the equator, its armored flanks opening to release reclamation organisms. Capillary tendrils uncoiled from its underside. Feeder vessels descended behind them, ready to drink the world once organized resistance ended. Colonel Dravus Cord appeared within the command projection. Static divided his face into flickering fragments. Blood stained his greatcoat. The bunker behind him shook continuously beneath distant impacts. Officers moved between failing cogitators, some carrying ammunition, rather than 3 surviving Navy commanders joined the council through damaged Vox links. One spoke from a cruiser, with half its prow gone. Another remained within an orbital platform, rotating too slowly to maintain altitude. The third commander's transmission showed smoke filling his bridge, while crewmen extinguished fires around the command throne. Voros displayed the death of Vardos. Reactor symbols burned across the planet. Promethium reservoirs appeared as glowing arteries beneath the crust. The remaining defense platforms, orbital debris fields, and surviving warships formed a broken circle above them. The head taker's descent vector ran through the largest hive ship. "The world becomes the charge," Voros said. Cord studied the projection. "You intend to detonate the equatorial reactors. All connected reactor chains. That will fracture the continent." "Yes." "The Promethium oceans will ignite beneath the crust." "Yes." "And the orbital batteries?" "They will fire upon the rupture points. The falling ring fragments will be directed into the atmosphere where possible. Your demolition networks will ignite after the hive ship commits to feeding altitude. One of the Navy commanders leaned towards his pict recorder. My remaining ships cannot escape the blast radius. They are not required to escape. The officer glanced towards unseen men upon his bridge. How long must we hold? Until Pale Moor surrounds the planet closely enough to feed. Cord's expression changed. He understood before the others. The armies must remain concentrated. Voros looked at him. The swarm will disperse if it believes the prey is escaping. Your forces will continue resisting from the equatorial belt. Every reclamation organism must be drawn within the planetary kill zone. There are still billions alive down there. There are billions of reasons the Tyranids will descend. The command bunker shook again. Dust crossed Cord's projection. You have condemned every soldier on Vardos. They were condemned when Pale Moor entered the system. You have merely chosen the manner of their death. I have chosen its value. No commander objected after that. The dying ships accepted their firing solutions. Orbital stations redirected lance arrays towards the planet. Reactor priests received sealed orders that would transform their sacred engines into bombs. Across Vardos, demolition charges armed beneath manufactorums, fuel reservoirs and fault lines already weakened by the cult. The system became a weapon built from everything the Imperium had failed to save. Cord ended the council and addressed his armies. He used every surviving Vox tower, shrine projector, and regimental command frequency. His face appeared above trenches filled with bodies. His voice sounded inside tanks with empty ammunition racks, medici vaults without medicine, and command posts where officers used the dead as sandbags. He did not promise relief. "Soldiers of Vardos," he said, "there are no transports coming." Men stopped reloading and listened. There are no reinforcements beyond this world. No fleet waits to break the blockade. No reserve army marches from the south. Every road behind us is closed. Every vessel above us is dying. The ground shook beneath the advance of the swarm. You will not survive this war. Some soldiers bowed their heads. Others laughed because terror had exhausted every other response. The enemy intends to consume us. It will strip the flesh from our dead, grind our armor into useful matter, and fashion new monsters from what remains. That is the future Pale Moor has prepared for us. Cord drew his power sword. Its field ignited in blue light. We will deny it. Across the equatorial belt, regiments fixed bayonets. Infantrymen opened their last ammunition tins and divided cartridges by hand. Tank crews loaded final shells into smoking breeches. Artillery officers erased withdrawal routes from their maps. Priests raised burned standards above troops too tired to stand without supporting one another. Your deaths may feed the devourer, Cord said, or they may choke it. There is no third fate. A soldier began beating the butt of his rifle against an empty ammunition crate. The sound spread along the trench. Make the Xenos remember that mankind is not cattle. Millions of voices answered him. For the Emperor. The final Tyranid assault struck from every direction. Gaunts entered the outer trench rings in tides so dense that those at the center could not reach the ground. They ran over one another, filling shell holes, climbing walls of alien corpses and falling beneath lasfire in layers. The Imperial line fired. Lasguns glowed at the muzzle until focusing rings cracked. Heavy bolters tore lanes through the swarm. Autocannons hammered Tyranid warriors into fragments of carapace and exposed meat. Mortars fired vertically into broods crossing the parapets. Tanks shot until their barrels sagged. A Lehman Russ crew fired the final battle cannon shell at a Carnifex less than 20 meters away. The explosion removed the creature's head and crushed the tank beneath its falling torso. The crew climbed from the wreck through alien blood and continued fighting with pistols. Hormagaunts poured into the infantry positions. Men vanished beneath claws. Limbs rose above the swarms before being pulled down.
Soldiers trapped beneath heaps of bodies pressed rifle muzzles through ruptured organs and continued firing from underneath the dead. A captain lost both legs to a ravener and remained upright against the trench wall long enough to empty his last pistol into its face. When the creature seized him, he bit the activation stud of a grenade held against his chest. The detonation filled the command trench with shredded flesh. Human ribs struck the walls beside alien talons. The ravener's upper body landed among the surviving officers and continued snapping its jaws until a commissar crushed its skull with a power fist. The Hierophants moved behind the swarm. Their biocannons dissolved fortress districts. Streams of acid crossed trenches and left nothing but bubbling outlines where thousands of soldiers had stood. Knights attacked their legs, thermal lances burning into carapace until the bio-titans crushed the engines beneath talons larger than hab blocks. The dead bought time. The reclamation organisms descended. Harvester beasts entered the corpse fields, drawing bodies into grinding mouths. Capillary towers erupted from the ground. Digestive pools opened along the equatorial plane. Feeder vessels lowered tendrils through the atmosphere. Pale Moore believed the world was ready to consume. Voros watched from the drop bay of the head-taker. Only the vessel's skeleton crew remained aboard. Serfs occupied fire control stations and reactor shrines. Servitors loaded the last bombardment shells. Vask stood upon the command dais, mechadendrites connected directly to the cruiser's wounded machine spirit. The surviving mortifactors entered drop pods. Tamas secured the fragments of the emissary's skull against his armor. Farkas carried gene seed caskets beneath layers of ceramite. Serid stood bareheaded, his psychic hood sparking as the shadow pressed through the hull. Vask opened a private channel to Voros. The machine spirit understands its death. Does it resist? It grieves that its guns will fall silent. Then ensure they do not fall silent early. The tech marine inclined his head. Command of the head-taker is accepted. You will enter the halls of the victors with the vessel's name. Vask's red armor remained motionless beneath the failing lights. Then let the dead prepare room. Voros entered the final drop pod. Launch. Explosive bolts fired. The pods fell from the dying cruiser and entered Vardos's atmosphere through storms of burning biological debris. Hulls glowed red. Tyrannid spores struck them and burst. One pod vanished beneath a harpy's wing before reaching the clouds. The others descended upon the central reactor citadel. Retro thrusters fired too late to soften the landing. Voros's pod struck a courtyard already filled with gaunts. The impact crushed dozens beneath the hull. Armored petals opened and threw broken organisms against the walls. The mortifactors emerged firing. The reactor citadel stood at the heart of the equatorial belt, a fortress of black stone, plasma conduits, and adamantium towers. Beneath it, linked reactors carried power through half the surviving manufactorums. Tyrannids covered every approach. Voros led the chapter into them. Bolters spoke until ammunition counters reached emptiness. Carnifexes died beneath melter fire. Tyrannid warriors lost heads to power swords and chainswords. Gaunts climbed across the dead so quickly that the mortifactors could no longer distinguish living targets from corpses underfoot. The warriors reached the inner gates. Tamas fired his last bolt into a warrior's throat. The shell detonated behind the jaw, projecting tongue, teeth, and spinal tissue across the gate. He discarded the weapon. Around him, other bolters ceased firing. The battle changed. Chainswords entered flesh until their teeth clogged with sinew. Warriors revved the weapons against walls, throwing strips of meat from the mechanisms, then returned to the killing. A Carnifex struck one mortifactor across the chamber. The warrior hit a reactor column hard enough to lose an arm. The severed limb remained trapped in the creature's claws. He rose, seized the fallen arm by the wrist, and used the ceramite gauntlet as a maul. The first blow broke a gaunt's spine. The second crushed another creature's head into its thorax. The Carnifex charged. Voros met it with his power sword. The blade entered the wound beneath its forelimb. He drove both hands against the hilt, cutting through muscle while the beast's crushing claw closed around his shoulder. Ceramite cracked. Tamas climbed the creature from behind and stabbed through the eye socket with his combat blade. The Carnifex convulsed. Voros tore his sword free and opened its throat. Dark blood flooded across his greaves. The beast collapsed against the reactor doors, forcing them shut beneath its weight. Mortifactors cut through the carcass to enter. Inside the control sanctum, human adepts knelt around the primary detonation altar. Their robes were soaked in blood. Several had removed their own eyes after hearing the hive mind through the reactor's machine chorus. Sered approached the astropathic throne. The signal path to orbit had failed. The shadow had become absolute. Vask's voice came through the local vox, broken by static. Trajectory aligned. Hive vessel entering collision range. Planetary detonation signal not received. Cord answered from somewhere beneath the surface battle. My command relays cannot penetrate the shadow. Voros looked at Sered. The librarian already understood. The astropathic throne had been designed to amplify choirs, not a single mind. Its soul circuitry remained connected to the reactor network. Through it, Sered could project one command across the psychic storm. The effort would kill him. Sered removed his gauntlets. Perhaps the dead will speak through me after all. Carolee was gone. The answer came only from Voros. They will speak your name. Sered seated himself upon the throne. Needles entered his skull. Interface spikes pierced the ports along his spine. Brass restraints closed around his limbs as the astropathic machinery awakened. The shadow found him immediately. Sered screamed. The sound became a psychic wound. Every sanctioned psyker on Vardos heard it. Tyrannid organisms paused across the battlefield. Pale Moor turned its immeasurable attention towards the mortal spark defying it. Sered opened his mind further. Blood ran from his nose and ears. Cracks appeared in the skin of his forehead. The bones beneath began separating under pressure. He saw Posel. He saw the Hall of Victors. He saw Carolee standing among the dead with final benediction resting across his shoulders. Ancient Odon waited beside him. Sergeant Bors wore his ruined Terminator plate. The skull of Sasebo Tezuka watched from an altar of black stone. Perhaps none of it was real. Sered no longer cared. He gathered every fragment of will that remained and hurled it through the shadow. His skull fractured. The sound was small beneath the machinery. Both eyes burst. Blood and vitreous fluid ran
down his cheeks. Psychic fire consumed the nerves behind them. Across the void, Vask heard a single word. Now. Sered died smiling. Techmarine Vask placed both hands upon the command throne of the head taker. The strike cruiser fired every remaining weapon. Lances struck the primary hive ship at point-blank range. Bombardment shells penetrated softened carapace and exploded inside gestation chambers. Torpedoes entered feeding apertures and detonated among living organs. The wounded vessel turned. Its tendrils reached for the cruiser. Vask drove the engines beyond their final tolerances. The head taker accelerated. It struck the hive ship prow first. Adamantium penetrated chitin. The cruiser buried itself within the living hull, crushing feeder chambers, nerve masses, and spawning cavities beneath its armored ram. Vask watched the machine spirit's final runes fade. Bone endures, he said. The plasma reactors overloaded. The head taker died inside Pale Moor's heart. The explosion tore the hive ship open. Its dorsal carapace split across hundreds of kilometers. Burning organs and rivers of boiling ichor erupted into space. Sections of the creature fell towards Vardos, entering the atmosphere as incandescent storms of alien flesh. Cord received the detonation rune. His hand rested upon the planetary trigger. He looked at the command officers around him. None asked for mercy. Fire, he said. The world ignited. Promethium oceans erupted beneath the crust. Fire traveled through subterranean reservoirs and burst from continental faults in pillars visible from orbit. Reactor chains detonated across the equatorial belt. Manufactorums vanished within expanding spheres of nuclear light. Orbital platforms fired upon Vardos. Lances struck the rupture zones. Macro shells penetrated the crust. Falling fragments of the orbital ring entered the atmosphere and impacted amid the opened continents. The equator split. Billions died before nerves could register pain. Human armies, tyrannid swarms, refugee columns and reclamation broods disappeared together. The blast wave traveled around the planet, tearing forests of capillary towers from the ground and throwing mountains of corpses into the burning sky. Pale Moor's feeding vessels were caught above the detonation. Radiation, debris, and poisoned biomass engulfed them. Bioships ruptured beneath the impact of continental fragments. Feeder organisms consumed flesh, saturated with reactor toxins and corrosive industrial compounds. Their internal systems failed. They convulsed and tore at themselves, while the fires spread through the fleet. The reactor citadel descended into darkness. Voros regained consciousness beneath a collapsed archway. Emergency runes glowed within his helm. Atmosphere warnings pulsed red. The air outside his armor contained ash, reactor poison, and too little oxygen. Fewer than 200 Mortificator identification signals remained. The extraction beacon was buried beneath kilometers of broken fortress and dead tyrannid flesh. Above them, the world continued tearing itself apart. Tamas pulled himself from beneath a fallen warrior. One leg of his armor had been crushed. Blood leaked from the joints. The fragments of the emissary's skull remained chained to his cuirass. He looked towards Voros through the blackness. Does victory matter if no one survives to remember it? The captain listened to the planet dying around them. The dead remember everything. Pale Moor did not die cleanly. Its broken vessels drifted above Vardos, like the carcasses of oceanic beasts. Their armor split, their organs frozen into black-red crystal. Some still twitched. Ruptured feeder tendrils coiled through the void, grasping at wreckage with the last impulses of dying nerve clusters. Smaller organisms crawled across their parent ships, attempting repairs that had lost all coordination when the synaptic heart burned. Radioactive debris filled the system. Fragments of the orbital ring turned through clouds of poisoned ash. Imperial hulls moved among them, with engines failing and ammunition nearly spent. Cruisers fired lances into isolated bioships. Destroyers hunted spore clouds with point defense batteries. One surviving defense platform rotated without stabilizers, discharging macro cannon shells each time its crippled targeting array crossed a living contact. There was no celebration upon the Navy command nets.
There were only kill confirmations, damage reports, and prayers spoken by men who knew their vessels might never leave the system. Vardos turned beneath them. The planet no longer resembled an inhabited world. Its equator was an incandescent wound. Continents had fractured along fault lines widened by reactor detonations. Promethium fires burned beneath the crust and escaped through thousands of fissures, staining the atmosphere red. More than 80 billion Imperial subjects had lived upon Vardos before Pale Moor came. Fewer than 12 million signals remained. They were scattered across sealed vaults, polar bastions, and isolated manufactorums, spared by chance rather than strategy. Many would die before rescue reached them. Others would live long enough to watch their flesh slough away from radiation sickness. The Imperium would record them as survivors. Beneath the ruins of the reactor citadel, the Mortifactors waited to learn whether victory had left room for life. The chamber around Captain Voros had once been a plasma regulation hall. The detonation had compressed it into a cavern of broken machinery and fused stone. Emergency lumens glowed dimly beneath layers of dust. The air was hot, thin, and poisoned by reactor leakage. 193 Mortifactors still answered the internal vox. Not all could stand. Some rested against collapsed pillars, with armor opened by claws or acid. Others lay upon the floor, while their brothers pressed sealant into wounds too deep for ordinary clotting agents. Bolter magazines were empty. Chains wards had ceased functioning,
their mechanisms clogged with fragments of bone, teeth, and cooked sinew. Apothecary Farkas moved among them. His narthecium was cracked. One arm remained bound against his breastplate. He worked with the other, opening the armor of fallen warriors and those who had not yet finished dying. A battle brother named Varek watched the apothecary cut through his abdominal plate. The tyrannid blade that wounded him had entered beneath the ribs and emerged through the spine. His lower body no longer responded. Blood filled his lungs with every breath. Both glands? Varek asked. If the secondary remains viable. It does. Farkas inserted the reductor. Varek's face tightened as the instrument entered his throat and removed the first progenoid gland. Blood flooded his mouth. He swallowed it, rather than allow himself to cough. The second gland lay within his chest. Farkas opened the armor and cut between shattered ribs. Varek watched his own blood run across the apothecary's gauntlet. Will I stand in the halls? That is not mine to judge. Will my gene seed endure? Yes. Varek nodded once. Then I have endured. Farkas removed the secondary gland, while the warrior remained conscious. Varek died before the organ entered its preservation vial. The apothecary marked the body with a strip of white cloth and continued to the next brother. The future of the chapter mattered more than the minutes remaining to any individual warrior. Movement sounded beyond the ruined blast doors. It did not possess the coordination of synaptic command. No psychic pressure preceded it. No warrior brood directed the advance. The creatures came because hunger survived everything else. Tyrannids crawled through the upper ruins and descended towards the heat of living bodies. Some were burned beyond recognition, their carapaces split and flesh hanging loose from exposed ribs. Others had lost limbs during the planetary detonation and dragged themselves forward upon claws. They entered the reactor depths in scattered packs. Voros rose. His left shoulder plate had collapsed inward. One arm moved only through the power armor's assistance. Blood had dried beneath his helmet seal. Formation. The Mortifactors built a shield wall across the regulation hall. Storm shields taken from the dead locked edge to edge. Warriors without shields stood behind them, carrying anything that could still kill. Combat blades, broken power sword hilts, severed genestealer talons, lengths of adamantium conduit sharpened against wreckage. Tamas stood at Voros's right. The skull fragments of the Norn emissary remained chained across his chest. His leg armor had locked at the knee, forcing him to stand with one foot braced against the rubble. The first gaunts entered the chamber. No synaptic will held them together. They attacked one another as often as the Mortifactors. Several stopped to consume fallen organisms. Others charged the heat signatures before them. "Hold," Voros said. The gaunts crossed the broken floor. "Hold!" One leapt. "Kill!" The shield wall struck forward. Bone and ceramite collided. Mortifactors drove captured claws through tyrannid skulls. Combat blades entered throats and soft tissue beneath jaws. A wounded veteran seized a gaunt by both forelimbs and tore the creature open across his armored knee. Alien blood flooded the formation. It hissed upon exposed flesh. One warrior had lost half his breastplate. Acid splashed across his chest and dissolved skin, muscle, and the outer surface of his ribs. He continued fighting, while his hearts became visible between smoking bones. A hormigaunt vaulted the shields. Tamas caught it by the throat. Its talons scraped across his damaged armor. He drove his thumbs beneath the creature's jaw and pulled until the lower mandible tore free. The gaunt thrashed, spraying black blood. He rammed the severed jaw through its eye socket. More organisms descended. Mortifactors fought with bare hands when weapons broke. They crushed gaunt skulls against the walls. They tore claws from dead creatures and used them upon the living. One battle brother lost his hand to a tyrannid bite, seized the creature by the neck with the bleeding stump, and beat it to death with his severed fist. The shield wall held until the warrior entered. It came through the blast doors, carrying a bone sword blackened by fire. Half its face was missing. The exposed brain pulsed beneath cracked carapace, yet some fragment of synaptic authority still lived within it. The gaunts around it changed. Their attacks became disciplined. The warrior struck the wall. Its sword passed through a storm shield and the mortifactor behind it. The blade entered beneath the warrior's chin and emerged through the crown of his helmet. It lifted him from the floor and cast him aside. Voros met the second stroke. His power sword had lost its field, but the blade remained sharp. He turned the bone weapon and drove his shoulder into the creature's chest. The Tyrannid was stronger. Its lower limbs seized his armor. Claws penetrated the damaged plate beneath his left arm and opened his torso. Voros fired his empty bolter by instinct. The weapon clicked. The warrior drove its sword through his abdomen. The point emerged from his back. Tamas saw the captain rise from the ground upon the blade. Voros struck the creature's skull with his powerless sword, once, then again. The blows opened the exposed brain, but the warrior did not release him. Tamas moved without awaiting command. He threw himself against the Tyrannid's wounded side. His combat blade entered the cracked carapace beneath its skull. He twisted until the edge snapped. The warrior turned. Tamas seized the broken blade with both hands and drove the jagged remnant into the exposed brain. The creature convulsed. Voros and the warrior fell together. Tamas pulled the captain free while the remaining gaunts surged into the breach. "First line, withdraw to the reactor channel," he ordered. No one had given him authority. No one questioned it. "Second line, charges upon the western tunnel. Faceless, draw the swarm east." The surviving neophytes obeyed. Tamas divided the defenders with the same cold certainty once used upon him. 6 warriors carried demolition charges into the western passage. 3 were wounded badly enough that withdrawal would be impossible. They understood. The first charge detonated. The tunnel roof collapsed upon the next wave of Tyrannids. Stone, armor plate, and reactor machinery buried hundreds of organisms. Dust filled the hall. The remaining creatures followed the Faceless towards the eastern channel. Tamas dragged Voros behind a shield-bearer, while Farkas cut the bone sword from the captain's body. "The primary heart is intact," the apothecary said. "The secondary? Pierced." Voros's helm turned towards Tamas. "You assumed command." "Yes. You did not request it. There was no time." Voros coughed blood into his helmet. "Good." Tamas reached the reactor controls. The eastern channel carried coolant from the buried plasma chambers. Warning runes showed pressure building beyond safe tolerances. If released, the superheated fluid would fill the passage and the regulation hall beyond it. The Faceless retreated through the gate. Tyranids came after them. Gaunts filled the channel. Raveners dragged themselves over the bodies. The wounded warrior rose once more behind them, brain tissue spilling from its broken skull. Tamas waited until every surviving mortifactor crossed the inner threshold. Then he opened the valves. Coolant entered the passage as white vapor. The first gaunts disappeared inside it. Flesh cooked from their bones. Carapaces cracked beneath the heat. The flow became a liquid wall that carried bodies against the sealed gate and reduced them to slurries of meat and chitin. The warrior reached the threshold. Its hands struck the closing doors. Superheated coolant filled its mouth. Eyes burst. The exposed brain boiled within the skull and ran down its face in grey streams. The doors sealed. Silence returned. Hours later, something knocked from the maintenance shaft behind the reactor altar. Mortifactors raised their remaining weapons. A human voice came through the metal. "Open, damn you, unless the angels of death have decided breathing is a sin." Tamas recognized Colonel Cord. The hatch was cut open. Cord emerged with 11 guardsmen. His left arm ended above the elbow. The stump had been closed with a tourniquet and cauterized by lasfire. Half his face was burned. His greatcoat had been replaced by a torn flak cloak, bearing the insignia of no surviving regiment. The men with him looked scarcely alive. One carried a laser gun without a charge pack. Another supported his entrails inside a blood-soaked ammunition pouch. All had crossed kilometers of maintenance tunnels while the planet died above them. Cord saw Voros lying beneath Farkas's instruments. "You survived." Voros's answer came weakly through his helm. "So did you." "Not many of us." "No." Cord looked around the hall at the wounded Mortifactors and the gene seed vials arranged beside their dead. "You murdered Vardos." The surviving warriors turned towards him. Cord did not retreat. "You murdered more than 80 billion Imperial subjects to save the surrounding systems." Voros forced himself upright. The movement reopened his abdominal wound. Blood ran across his armor. Vardos was not murdered. Cord's remaining hand closed into a fist. "I watched continents burn. The planet died when Pale Moor chose it. Everything after that determined what its corpse would purchase. You speak as though none of them mattered. They mattered as ammunition matters." Cord stared at him for a long time. Then he began to laugh. It was not humor. It was grief, emptied of every gentler sound. "You truly believe that?" Voros's bone-colored helm faced him. "Belief is unnecessary." The extraction beacon remained buried, but its signal had not died. Surviving Navy vessels triangulated it through the reactor interference. Rescue craft descended into Vardos's poisoned atmosphere under the protection of the last operational fighters. They found the citadel after 2 days. Melter cutters opened a path through the ruins. Naval armsmen and medici teams entered wearing sealed radiation armor. They discovered guardsmen, dead tyrannids, and skull-faced giants waiting in darkness. 147 Mortifactors were recovered alive. Of the 386 who had come to Vardos, the rest remained beneath the world, within dead bioships or scattered across battlefields erased by fire. Third Company had been gutted. Most of the First Company contingent lay dead. Every deployed dreadnought had been destroyed. The head-taker existed only as radioactive adamantium buried inside the ruptured synaptic corpse of Pale Moor's largest hive ship. The Inquisition arrived before the chapter could depart. 3 interrogators and an Ordo Xenos Lord met Voros aboard the Navy cruiser Indomitable Penance. All were men. All wore sealed black armor beneath long coats marked with the sigil of the Holy Orders. They questioned him within a chamber surrounded by armed stormtroopers. They spoke of Gate Sepulchre. They spoke of 400 million soldiers burned within the valley of Saint Orphiel. They spoke of refugee columns erased by Imperial artillery, command officers executed for disobedience, and human traitors whose flesh had been consumed by the Mortifactors. The Inquisitor, "Lord Plaster, you annihilated an Imperial tithe world." Voros stood without armor. Surgical staples crossed his torso. One arm remained suspended within a regeneration brace. "Yes. You sacrificed billions without authorization." "Yes. You ordered cannibal rites performed before Astra Militarum personnel." "Yes." The Inquisitor waited. Voros offered no defense. "No plea of necessity?" the man asked. "No." "No invocation of strategic emergency?" "No." "Then explain your actions." Voros looked through the viewing port at the corpse of Vardos. The Emperor required a weapon. The Inquisitor's hand rested near his pistol. "And?" "We provided a world." No censure came. The Imperium had lost too much to punish the weapon that remained. A replacement vessel carried the survivors from Vardos. Within its cargo hold, the Mortifactors performed the funerary feast. Their dead were named. Gene seed was counted and sealed. Trophy chains were placed around empty suits of armor. The fragments of the Norn emissary's skull were mounted above the place where Carolee should have stood. Farkas opened the reliquary containing the preserved heart of the cult commander taken beneath Hive Ossuar. Voros cut one piece from it. He consumed the flesh without ceremony. "The enemy's strength is inherited," he said. "Its death enters our memory." The blooded answered, "Bone endures." Tamas received the carving blade. He knelt before the emissary's skull fragments and engraved the names of the fallen into the alien bone. He carved Bors, Karoli, Sered, Odon, Vask. Then he carved the names of the faceless neophytes who had died without trophies. The chapter had refused to remember them. Tamas remembered. Voros watched him commit the breach of custom. He did not intervene. Pozzel was gone. Its night forests would raise no more sons. The chapter could preserve every tradition until those traditions became another tomb, or decide which memories deserved to survive. The blade continued scratching against bone. When the names were complete, the Mortifactors returned to the Basilica Mortis. The Norn emissary's skull was installed within the Hall of Victors among thousands of human and Xenos dead. Its broken crest towered above the altar. Karoli's scorched scythe rested beneath it. Voros entered the basalt sarcophagus. Farkas slowed his twin hearts. Darkness received him. He saw 12 worlds burning beyond the Great Rift. He saw fortresses fall, crusade fleets drown, and suns vanish behind swarms without end. Behind them, something vast turned its attention towards the Imperium. 1 billion eyes opened. Voros smiled within the grave. Prepare the feast.